Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Chattanooga City Council for Tuesday, February 10th. I'd like to invite Councilwoman Dotley to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have quite a few folks here today. There are many days when we have a lot of people here, and I want you all to know, if you don't regularly attend council meetings, that we don't have a way to know why people are here. We are we will be considering at strategic planning adding an element to collect information on why people are here so that we can fill you in. But we understand that last week we had a lot of people who joined us for the meeting who wanted to talk about immigration enforcement and were frustrated as first-time council attendees at the way that our meetings work. So I want to just briefly let you know, if you're here for your first time, today we do have a special presentation from our police chief, and I believe our mayor is going to speak. Thank you, Mayor Kelly, for being here. But after that, we will do a review of our agenda for today. Then we will look at our agenda for 2 weeks, and then we will look at our agenda for 3 weeks from now, 3 to 4 weeks out. We are a council that works far in advance so that we are able to make very thoughtful decisions. Also today, we have a budget committee meeting that has a great deal of information on budget policies that we've been working on for quite some time, that I think that by the time we finalize them are going to be a smart choice for fiscal responsibility for our city. So we will work through all of that. Then we will take a recess. Typically our recesses are about 45 minutes long. When we leave here, we typically keep working. Some of us have been in meetings since 9:30 this morning, meeting. So we will be meeting on some legal matters, and then we will come back. So that is how our day will go. We are glad you are here. If you are here and would like to speak, please know that this council does stay until the last person is finished speaking. We want to hear from you. Public comment is a time for you to share how you feel. It is not set up to be a back and forth, but every one of us represents a district in the city and is available not just in this meeting today, but in other ways via email, personal meetings, phone calls. So please do take advantage of all of those opportunities. That said, I would like to get us started with our special presentation brought to us by our police chief, John Chambers. And I believe that Mayor Kelly is going to introduce him and introduce this presentation.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Before you hear from Chief Chambers, he's got a good presentation. I think will be very informative for everybody here, but I wanted to address some comments that were reported in the Times Free Press about this complex legal landscape that we're navigating regarding state mandates and immigration enforcement. The comments were from a much broader discussion with the editorial board there and without full context. So if I was unclear there, let me clarify. My job is to protect this city, and it's very difficult to protect a city that is divided. As mayor, I have to be a pragmatist to be effective. We're operating under state laws like Public Chapter 716 that leave us very little room to maneuver, and we must follow the law. As mayor, I took an oath to uphold the law, and that includes any mandates handed down from Nashville. Only elections can change that. But following the law does not mean that we lose our values. And the values I laid out in the One Chattanooga plan remain my values and the values of this administration, and those values do not include racism or xenophobia. Like you, I've been deeply disturbed by the aggressive and violent nature of ICE tactics that we've seen in other parts of the country, and I never want to see that here. Any locally governed scenario is preferable to that, which is the point that I was trying to make to the newspaper. But these times just underscore the fact, frankly, that our country desperately needs a functional immigration system. We are in local government stuck in the middle until Congress acts to create meaningful immigration reform. The vast majority of immigrants simply need a clear path to legal citizenship so that employers and immigrants don't have to continue to skirt the law in order to get by. And I sincerely hope this becomes a major topic in the upcoming congressional midterm elections and that federal enforcement efforts return immediately to peaceful and civil and constitutional methods. And as you'll hear from Chief Chambers, the Chattanooga Police Department is not and will not be an arm of federal immigration enforcement. Our officers are trained as guardians, guided by compassion, and governed by the Constitution of the United States. Their job is to keep our neighborhoods safe, which depends entirely on building and maintaining trust throughout the community. But make no mistake, we are navigating a very thin line. We will fulfill our state legal obligations because we must, but we will do so without compromising the community trust that has taken us so many years to build. Our principles have not changed. We remain committed to constitutional policing, to transparent reporting, and to one Chattanooga where every resident, no matter where they started, can live with dignity and without fear. So the bottom line is this. My goal as mayor is to run a peaceful and prosperous city. And that means a city that is both economically vibrant and fundamentally decent. For those goals to be met, we must remain a welcoming and diverse community, and I will do everything in my power to make sure we live up to that goal. So I think now we want to hear from Chief Chambers. He's got a presentation to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kelly. I appreciated those words very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for allowing me to be here today to take this time. I know our time is very valuable, and I truly appreciate this opportunity. I've been an instructor kind of throughout my career, so I say that because at times, especially like in my personal life, possibly with my wife, whenever I do start to explain things, I can over-explain them. I do plan on going into some detail today. That's not because I believe anybody is ignorant or anything like that. So please don't take like I'm talking down to anyone. I don't want to assume that what may be common knowledge to me is also common knowledge everywhere else. So I'm going to go into some intricate details about police reporting and things like that. So please bear with me. For the sake of time, there's some introduction slides and things that I will be moving past, title slides and stuff like that. I'll move through that quickly. I want to start by making this statement. The Chattanooga police officers serve every member of our community with dignity, fairness, and respect. Our mission to keep you, your family, and our community safe is rooted in constitutional policing. We protect people. We do not target them because of who they are, where they come from, or the language they speak. Now, there's been a lot of concern that has been brought about based on this data, based on the monthly release of data from the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. And if I didn't understand data and I didn't know any better, I would be equally concerned. Because the way this data presents, and as you will see in the excerpt from the Chattanooga Times Free Press, indicating a 47% increase in ICE detention rate per 100,000. When you see those numbers, it is alarming. When you see those numbers, you're left with nothing but to assume that what that represents is that the Chattanooga Police Department is out here unequally enforcing the law against a particular community, that we're targeting our Hispanic and Latino community because, look, we made 20 arrests that ended up being either a lawful detention or deportation in the month of December. That would be very concerning if I didn't understand what this data truly represented. That's not what is being reported. It is being misconstrued as something that it is not. When you're analyzing data, the data you analyze, you're looking to make a comparison to see, is there an increase or decrease? The manner in which that data was collected has to be consistent. If you change the parameters by which data is aggregated or the parameters by which the data is applied, you change the data set. So if you take data that was collected under a particular parameter, and then you change that parameter based on a law change, you can't compare past to present because the data sets are completely different. So when you see this increase and you're mixing past protocols with previous law versus new protocols and new law, you cannot compare those two data sets. That is not the same reality that the data was collected in. It is very, very important that as we're reading this, that we're doing our best to ask the right questions. and I hope to be able to answer some of those here. This is our data. This is our arrest data, starting at the top with the number of individuals that were the age of 18 or older in 2025 that were arrested by the Chattanooga Police Department. Now, I want to explain, this is where I want to get into a little bit of detail. So the way our data is aggregated and collected is based on something called the Tennessee Incident-Based Reporting System. The Tennessee Incident-Based Reporting System is a derivative of the National Incident-Based Reporting System. And in the early to mid-90s, the U.S. government realized that we did not have nationwide a consistent way to compare data from one state to the next, honestly, from one city jurisdiction or one county jurisdiction to the next. It was not consistent. It was all over the map. So they come up with a way to do that. Tennessee adopted those rules. What those rules do is they dictate to all law enforcement agencies of how we will collect data and what data we shall collect. There are no options. These are required fields. Two of those required fields are relevant here. One of those is race. The other is ethnicity. Ethnicity is not race. So if you're of the Hispanic or Latino community, your ethnicity would be Hispanic according to what we are required to report. It is not a race. So you could be white, you could be black, you could be Asian, and also have Hispanic ethnicity. So the proper way, and we have been a TIBRS agency since the late 90s when that was adopted by the state of Tennessee. So our data is accurate, collected the same all the way back then to present. So we did a 3-year analysis to see what does it look like from an arrest standpoint. Are we targeting any particular group of people, especially or specifically our Hispanic and Latino community? So as you see at the very top is every individual 18 or over that we arrested. So we arrested 7,658 individuals for something last year, which is a 5% decrease from 2024, and 2024 was down 14.2% from 2023. We have consistently arrested fewer and fewer people year over year. The chart to the bottom left is where we're able to drill down into the data to try to answer the question that's being asked, which is a community being targeted based on their ethnicity? And as you see, of that 7,658 individuals that were arrested, 7,078 of them were not of a Hispanic ethnicity. 500 and I think that's 80 were, which is a 6.6% decrease from the year before. The individuals who were not of Hispanic ethnicity was a 4.9 or 5% decrease. Both of these decreases are consistent with the overall data you see in the top, the overall aggregate that is demonstrated there. The other question that I've received many times is about driver's license or driving without a license. And I'm going to go into some scenarios here in a few minutes to explain this in great detail. But what we did was we took that number, the 580 number, and we pulled out the number of individuals over the last 3 years that were arrested specifically for driving without a license. And that is the data in the chart that you see there, where last year in 2025, we actually experienced a 3-year low in the number of individuals of Hispanic ethnicity that were arrested who were the age of 18 or older. That is completely contrary to what is being assumed by the release and analysis of other data sets. These are the facts, and we can't change this. This is what is going on. So the Chattanooga Police Department unequivocally is not targeting anyone for their ethnicity or the country they're from or the language they speak. And at the same time, our overall crime numbers continue to go down. Continue to go down in some areas drastically. And we ask ourselves, well, why is that? That is because our focus is exactly what I said it was. Our focus is to keep our community safe. We have focused specifically and especially on violent crime. Last year, the city of Chattanooga experienced fewer homicides than what we have experienced in over 25 years. We saw a 48% reduction in homicides last year. At the same time, criminal shootings. These are offenses that we see on the news regularly. It affects every single one of us. It especially affects our underserved communities even more. Our criminal non-fatal shootings last year was at an all-time record low. We started separating aggravated assaults from a shooting, because in Tennessee, the definition of an assault or aggravated assault is assault with a deadly weapon. So whether it's a baseball bat or a knife or a gun, it's all the same thing. So in 2013, we separated that data out for criminal non-fatal shootings. And last year, we saw fewer than we had ever recorded since 2013. That is because of the deliberate efforts by the Chattanooga Police Department, as well as our community partners, other city departments, non-governmental organizations, our faith-based organizations. We have all collectively and collaboratively worked together to see this type of result for our city. And I am extremely proud of all the work that we have done. This is not done by victimizing any one community. This is done in collaboration in an attempt to keep our community safe. Now, when I spoke briefly about changing the parameters of a data set, July 1st, 2024, House Bill number 2124 was passed. It reads like this: all law enforcement agencies and officials shall, in accordance with 8 U.S.C. 1357 G10, communicate with the appropriate federal officials regarding the immigration status of any individual, including reporting knowledge that a particular alien is not lawfully present in the United States. In 2024, July 1st specifically, Tennessee legislature passed this law. That means if any police officer has knowledge that someone is here in an unauthorized capacity, we shall communicate with the proper federal authorities. There is no leeway. Now, when we saw this bill coming through, because it was technically passed or approved in April of that year with the effective date of July, we reached out to the state to ask, how are we able to do this? Because as police officers working for a municipal government, we don't have access to an immigration database. There is no way that we can determine what that looks like. So how can we? And in that conversation, it was determined that because of how our arrest process works through and with the Hamilton County Jail, we can't do anything about that. We don't have the authority, we don't have the access to make that determination. It is literally impossible. The manner in which we meet that is that Hamilton County Sheriff's Office is tasked with identifying if an individual is here or not. That is part of the law. And when they determine that someone is, they are required by law to make that notification. I also want to be clear. The Chattanooga Police Department does not have its own jail. We haven't had a city jail since sometime in the 80s. I believe it was the early 80s. The only place that we can take a prisoner or an arrestee is the Hamilton County Jail. We have no other choice. When you change the parameters by which data is applied or aggregated, it changes the data set. So you cannot look at 22 or 23 or even the first 6 months of 24 and compare that to anything. It is inaccurate, and that is not how you analyze data. I also recognize there's been a lot of discussions around the 287G program. Now, while we're not part of this, nor do we have any intent on being part of it, I want to discuss a little bit with everyone here about the initial conversations whenever I was appointed chief. And we recognized this was going to be an issue for our community. As I've stated, and as we will continue to focus, our mission is to keep our community safe. Our focus is violent crime. And any additional resources that I have to pull away from that to focus on someone else's agenda, I am not interested in. That is not what is best for this city. And that is not something I'm willing to compromise. Therefore, we have never been part of this. There have never been any conversations about us being part of this because there are different models. You have a task force model, you have a jail model. I'll explain a little bit about that. I don't know all the intricacies because we're not part of it. It is my understanding on the task force model that I would have to select police officers to send to, I don't even know where they go, but they would go to a federal training site and be trained by the federal authorities on how to investigate, identify, and fill out paperwork related to immigration. Once they came back to the police department, they would then be granted access to information and data sets by which they would use to query or to search individuals to determine their immigration status. I am not going to devote resources to something that is not going to benefit our community, especially when we are so afflicted by violence. That's not something that we're going to do. The jail model is similar in that way. The jail model, the sheriff's office would have to send officers to be trained. When they come back, they would have to have access to the information in the databases in order to fulfill that part of their obligation. Now, here's something that I found very interesting, because we've read a lot, I've seen and heard a lot about the sheriff's office and the fact that they did sign the MOU to participate in this. But understanding the processes that has to take place before that program is actually implemented, I asked the question. And as of at least Saturday, the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office has not fully implemented the 287G program. They still don't have access to the database, to the data set. So all of the numbers that are being reported that some individuals are misconstruing to mean something it's not, all of those numbers are 100% predicated on state law changing, requiring the communication from the Hamilton County Jail to the proper federal authorities. Now I want to go over some scenarios. I'm going to talk about 3 scenarios. So it's not been a secret if you live in the downtown area, mufflers and loud noises, loud mufflers are a thing. It will literally, can physically hurt your ears if somebody revs up as they're going by. We received a lot of community complaints, and this summer we did quite a few traffic enforcement actions in the immediate downtown and North Shore area. We wrote a lot of tickets. So I'm going to use that as the premise to set this up as possibly this could have happened during that time or any other traffic stop. So an officer hears a loud muffler that goes by, rattles the windows of his SUV, makes the traffic stop. The officer approaches, asks for the individual's driver's license, ID and driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Standard questions. And then has a brief discussion about why they're being stopped. Goes back to their vehicle. To what we say is, we're going to run them for warrants and a license check. Those are our words. What that means is we're going to access a database and query this individual's name, date of birth, and driver's license number to determine if they have a valid driver's license, if there's any local warrants, or if there's any warrants outside of our jurisdiction. There are 3 databases that we have access to. Our own local RMS, TIES, which is the state database that maintains all of the driver's license and vehicle registration information, and NCIC, which is a national database. That's where things like warrants outside of our jurisdiction are loaded into, stolen vehicles, orders of protection, missing persons, things of that nature. They are entered into that database. Those are the only databases that we have access to by which that we check someone's information. The officer runs the information. Comes back, the person has a valid driver's license. The officer, I almost said write because I've done this a couple times in my head. We don't write citations anymore. That was back in my day. Now we do it on it's like a phone, tablet thing. So the officer fills out the citation, walks up, issues the citation, the driver goes on. Scenario 2, the officer makes the same traffic stop for the exact same reasons. In this scenario, when the officer approaches, asks for driver's license, registration, and insurance, the individual says, well, I have a driver's license, but I left it at home. By law, that is technically driving without a license. Okay, but it doesn't mean you stop there. It doesn't mean that person automatically goes to jail. Further questions are asked. Okay, is this registration, is this your vehicle? Well, yes, it is. Okay. Do you have any other form of ID? Do you have a passport with you? Do you have any other form, another form of a state legal ID? Well, no, I don't. Okay. Officer goes back to the car and searches those same 3 databases. If this individual has a driver's license, we have access to their photo as well as the ability to verify the information that they provided us on the vehicle registration. And in that scenario, the individual would be issued a citation and sent along their way, because the officer is able to confirm that this person is who they say they are. Now, in this third one, the officer approaches and the individual says, I don't have an ID. Okay, the same questions are asked. Do you have any other form of ID? I do not. Do you have a driver's license in any state? I do not. Okay, the officer goes back to the car. He searches name, date of birth, whatever information that he has obtained from the individual. If the officer is not able to affirm that this individual is who they say they are, the officer cannot, by law, issue a citation. We have to be able to verify that you are who you say you are before we can issue a citation. At that point, the officer has to take the person to jail, which is a full custody arrest. The officer transports the individual to jail, fills out the booking paperwork, the affidavit, swears to the affidavit, and gets back in service. That is the end of CPD's involvement in any form of deportation. That is the end. The reason that's the case is I can arrest you if I don't know who you are. Trust me, John Doe has been arrested more times in this city than any other human ever. And that's, I know it's a little bit, a little funny, but that is the truth. Because it is the jail's responsibility. Before the individual enters into the judicial process, they have to determine who that person is, that they are who they say they are. It is at that point that if a member of the Hamilton County Jail determines that this individual may be here in an unauthorized capacity, that they are required by state law to make that phone call.
May I ask one quick clarifying question, because you changed your wording ever so briefly. I want to make sure we all understand. You said at that point the officer can make an arrest, but your previous statements were that, I think you don't mean may, but they are required
That's
to make
correct.
an arrest, right?
That's correct.
It's not a choice.
In order to
It is
enforce, yes ma'am,
by
in order
law,
to
you would
consistently,
have to make an arrest.
enforce the law,
Okay.
the only option is to arrest.
Thank you.
Yes. CP does not make immigration-related arrests or decisions or detentions. CP does not make arrests based on citizenship or immigration status. CPD does not possess the ability to determine immigration status. CPD does not track, charge, or target individuals based on their immigration status. And CPD does not participate in any form of immigration enforcement, as that is outside the scope of our authority. And we simply do not have the access to the information to even bring state law into play. In the spirit of transparency, I wanted to talk about a couple things. The Chattanooga Police Department has been a nationally accredited organization through CALEA for over 25 years. In 2025, we actually, the first time ever that the CPD received 100% compliance to all of the expected policies and procedures set forth by this third party. What this does is we open ourselves up to an inspection every single year by this third-party organization. And their job is to search through all of our records, to search through all of our policies, to ensure that our custom policy and practice are consistent with the law, the Constitution, as well as industry standard. And as part of that, we're required to do certain analyses every single year. Use of force, vehicle pursuit, and internal affairs. All three of which are vital to building trust within our community. Vital. Now, once I was appointed chief, we decided we would make these public. They're already available, but a lot of people don't know that. So we went back the last 3 years and placed all three of those reports open on our website. And they've been there, and we will continue to do that this year. Our annual report for 2024 was also placed on there, and 2025 will be available, as well as the other three reports will be available on our website. Our goal is early spring. We'd also like to take just a second to talk a little bit about continued transparency. The CPD for over 20 years has had a community police academy. That is a literal behind-the-scenes look. It is every Thursday night for 9 consecutive weeks where you can come in and you will meet officers and they will explain what we do, how we do what we do, and most importantly, why we have to do it that way. We have received nothing but glowing reviews from individuals who have attended that because we are as transparent as you could possibly be. Our fall class was actually the largest that we had ever had. And I would love for our spring class, which is coming up in March, I would love for that to break that record. Additionally, we're talking about Freedom of Information Act. Not just reports or data requests, body cam footage, all of our internal investigations, all of that is open to our Freedom of Information Act. And if anyone has a question about the thoroughness or having access to reports, arrest reports, anything like that, you absolutely can gain access. The Chattanooga Police Department remains dedicated to ensuring the safety of all residents through constitutional policing that respects individual rights, fulfills state-mandated reporting requirements without compromising community trust, and maintains accountability through transparent reporting, and that will not change. Now, I've talked a lot about processes, facts, and law. I want to speak for just a moment about the humanity that we are seeing play out in our streets across the country, and thank God that it's not happening here. 2 weeks ago, there was a young member of our community here that had asked me some questions because this individual had some concerns and really felt that we were intentionally targeting our Hispanic and Latino community for immigration enforcement. And they asked me a question. They said, how does it feel when you arrest someone and you know you're tearing them away from their family? And when I gave them my response, they said, people need to hear you say that. So I want to talk about that for just a second. My response is it absolutely sucks. It absolutely sucks when you come in to a home and the children are crying their eyes out because mom and dad have been in a fight. And because state law requires you to determine who the primary aggressor is, and you make an arrest. And as you're escorting mom or dad out, you hear the kids say, please don't take my mommy, or please don't take my daddy. Even though we do wear uniforms, we are humans. And that is a difficult thing to do repeatedly. Just this past summer, I was working some time on midnight shift, and I backed up a couple of our officers. They were on Brainerd Road. They had made a traffic stop. This young man had had a rough patch. He had about 2 years prior where he'd been arrested a few times. He lost his license. And he was bragging about what all he had done. And he had every right to brag, to get his license back. He got a job. He'd saved up some money, bought a car. He got his own apartment. As the officer was doing what I described earlier, a warrant came back. During the process of him getting his license back, he overlooked something, and a judge took a warrant out on him. And we had to take him to jail. And when we explained that, he sobbed. It absolutely sucked. Not a single one of us, I looked in the eyes of the other two officers, not a single one of us wanted to put him in jail. Not at all. But we do not have a choice. The law doesn't allow us to apply our opinions or our thoughts or beliefs into how we enforce the law. That is something we have experienced in this country, in this city, and I will fight like hell to keep it from ever happening again. We're not going to subjectively or bias our enforcement efforts. That is not something we are doing, and that is not something that we will ever do. Knowing what the narrative is, or in some circles, what the narrative is about CPD right now, despite the presentation of the accurate data. We knew coming into this, I knew coming into this current administration with the president, that there was different ideals, different perspectives, different missions, and that it was going to adversely affect our ability to protect the Hispanic and Latino community when they may need us the most. Because the result of this, the result of misinformation, is you increase the level of fear, and then you decrease their opportunity to feel like they can call for help when they need it. That is also a tragedy, because nobody wants to see children suffer because they don't have someone to protect them, because they don't have someone to stand up for them, because they don't have access to the support that they should have, because they're afraid. Knowing that, and knowing that historically the Chattanooga Police Department has maintained a very good working relationship with La Paz. In recent years, that relationship had withered, and I made deliberate efforts to rebuild that, and we have. Spoken at town hall meetings, at several events, been asked to speak by our Director of New Americans, Office of New Americans, spoke at a few events. The goal here was to try and bridge the gap, to try and earn the trust that we knew was going to be fractured. And in my monthly meetings with the senior leadership of La Paz, we're finding out that those efforts were not paying off. And I was actually sitting on the front porch one morning, I believe it was back this past spring, of Dr. Everlina Holmes, and she mentioned how effective the block leader model was within the city. And I kind of had an idea of what if we could apply elements of that model to our Hispanic and Latino community. Because I can go speak to a group all day long, and I'm wearing this, and my words will only go so far. But what if we could build relationships with individuals in those communities that already had the trust and respect? And what if we could provide those individuals with access and information to help provide that support? So my victim services unit partnered with some of the mayor's staff, and we're piloting that project right now. That is an active and ongoing project that we are trying, because we're committed to continuing to try and serve however we can, because none of us want individuals in those communities to suffer. And some of those individuals, a large number of those individuals, are here, are authorized to be here, but they're still subjected to the same fear, and that's unacceptable. So as I was preparing for today, I thought a lot about some of the things that I'd read online, some of the news reports that I'd heard, and the implications that we were targeting the Latino and Hispanic community. And I thought, you know what? Maybe they're right. We are targeting the Hispanic and Latino community. We are targeting them to go out of our way to give them access to the support and resources that they desperately need in a time when others are not. That is something that I'm continuing to do, and I'm committed in that area and will not waver. Thank you for your opportunity. Do you have any other questions?
Thank you very much. Chief Counsel, do we have any questions? The board is quiet. Chief Chambers, I want to say thank you very much. You've been listening as I've brought this need for the public to hear what you just shared. And I know that I especially, the data for me is encouraging, but also I'm really glad that you took some time and shared the human perspective of being a police officer. Our Chattanooga police officers see things that no one of us would ever want to see in our lives. And you all carry a great burden on our behalf in trying to keep us safe. It's important, I think, as a community for us to always be looking to how we work together, not opposed to one another. And I don't know if this has answered everyone's concerns, but I know for me, found it very helpful. Thank you very much, and thank you again, Mayor Kelly, for sharing.
Yes, ma'am.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, council, let's take a look at our agenda for tonight. Oh, minutes. Thank you, darling. Before we do that, council, can I get a motion on the minutes from last week?
So moved.
Thank you. Minutes will stand without objection. All right, so taking a look at today's agenda, we do have a couple of items under final reading, or one item, excuse me, under final reading. Then let's take a look at ordinances under first reading. We have several planning items. We do have the air pollution control. Councilwoman Dotley.
Yes, Madam Chair, for item D, 2026-001, I did get an update from Karen Rennick earlier today about special exceptions that can be made in this particular zone. So I will be offering an amendment for no liquor store there because it's close to the other store that was also one liquor store, just all down Dodge Avenue. So I'll be offering that amendment, and I hope, I know we'll have the public hearing and everything, but I wanted to mention that now.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Councilman Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Under planning, item F, I'm going to be looking to defer this today till March 10th. I've already talked to the applicant, and we're going to come to our neighborhood association before we continue.
Okay.
On this item.
Did you say March 10th?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Okay. All right, council, looking at resolutions, we have a handful of appointments. I would like to point out item C, council, this is the resolution related to our council rules of operations. We do have an alternate version that came through late that is more specific to the items that we talked about in strategic planning. There is one section that I think, that I know we decided we were going to continue to discuss, which is on page 5, item C3, related to the 5 yes or 5 no votes. I don't see any lights. I would suggest, council, that if we choose to vote on this alternate version, which is the one I will have read, that we do make an amendment to strike the language about the quorum, because we were going to review that on our March 17th strategic planning. So that section is, unless a majority, the new language that's in here that we weren't quite ready to decide on was, quote, unless a majority of the quorum present choose to allow the majority of all members present to approve any issue based on timeliness or expense concerns in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order. Councilwoman Dotley.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, I just want to be clear, for that item 5C3 under voting, this is what we currently have, correct?
So 5C3,
Is this what you're speaking of? Am I right? Is this the area, is this the place you're talking about?
we talked about it at strategic planning, but what happened was the attorney's office, they created the alternate version that represents our discussion from last week. So it's in your, you have a link to it from Maria. But there was one item that they included that we had not had a agreement on.
Okay,
So, we talked about, how might we want to handle that? And we
Right.
said, we aren't ready to make a decision on that.
right, okay.
So the other items that are in the red line version clarify the fact that a chairman pro tempore would be elected. They're on page 1, pursuant to the city charter. The change to the name of the Community Development Committee, a change to the vice chairperson's responsibilities, and then the council expense reimbursement section. The main version on the agenda does not reflect the discussion that we had about being able to transfer and also modernizing the language. So the alternate version has that.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I may have some questions later about that particular one.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Maria sent a red line at 11:40 that should have everything.
Yes, Maria sent a red line at 11:40 that you could, yes. That's what's, yeah, what I'm discussing is the red line.
Did you?
Yeah, I didn't see that either, so that's why I'm asking questions about it.
Did she not send to the entire council?
Believe so.
I'm sure she did, but
But 11:40, we were.
Okay,
Like that.
all right, so you guys can take a look at that and determine how we want to move forward at the meeting. Okay, we have a couple of resolutions under economic development. A couple of parks and public works items. And we will have a report on debt obligation. Okay, taking a look, I see no lights, so let's take a look at our purchases for today. Councilwoman Burrs.
Yeah, I do want to circle back to the resolution on our rules of operation real quick.
Okay.
When is the discussion going to be for the pieces that are still outstanding? Is that going to be at our upcoming, our strategic planning?
Yes.
March 17th? Okay, thank you.
Yes. Do you have any other questions about this, today's agenda before we move to purchases? Okay, seeing none, let's take a look at purchases. We have 4 purchases today. If you have any questions, hit your light. Councilman Elliott.
This is, sorry, it called me as soon as I hit that light. This is adjacent to the, tree conversation, the tree. Hold on, am I on the right one? Sorry, I'm on the wrong week. This is adjacent to the tree, purchase we have. April, can we connect after this? I have some questions on some of the other trees planting we're doing in parks. But let's just connect offline. That's it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Do we have any questions about purchases? Council, we do have 1 emergency purchase. We do not have any renewals, RFPs, or sole source purchases. Councilwoman Dotley.
yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about the emergency purchase. Do we know how long, or can Chief or someone from CPD advise on how long it would take, for the remediation to get done? I know right now, administrative offices are kind of spread out across various places.
This
So-
is the mold
Mold
remediation,
remediation,
Chief.
yeah. So do you know how long that would take, and then when you would get everybody reestablished back down on Amapola?
So what they've told us is 3 months from when they started. They started last week. So we're hoping, I don't want to hold my breath for 3 months, but that's what we're hoping they can stick to that timeline. They intentionally have brought in a large force because, obviously us being displaced is very difficult on everybody. So our hope is that we can be back in there by, April, Mayish at the latest.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, council, looks like we're good on purchases. Let's take a look at next week's agenda, please. Items under first reading for next week, we have a couple of mandatory referrals in District 5. Planning item in District 8. Some economic development resolutions. Hit your light if you've got any questions. Comments? Okay, seeing none, let's take a look at future considerations, please. Future considerations is pretty open right now, council. Do have some items for the city attorney and the mayor's office and the council office. If you have any questions or comments, please hit your light. All right, looks like we're good on that. We have a big budget meeting that we are going to have this afternoon, so I will hand.
Madam Chair, before you, I have one more question.
Okay, Councilwoman Burrs.
Thank you. For the city attorney, could Maria just resend that again?
Yes, ma'am.
The
I've asked her
last
to.
email I'm looking at is at 11:44.
Yes.
And it does not have the red line in it, so. Did she? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Super.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Budget Chairwoman Dotley for our Budget and Finance Committee meeting.
right, council. This is our budget committee meeting for February the 10th, 2026. Can I get approval on the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you so much. Minutes stand without objection. So before we get started, just our agenda is pretty lengthy today. So I wanted to give an overview first. So if, Rick, you can bring up yes, that's the right one. Yes. This, presentation, please. Thank you so much. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. And I wanted to just give us a brief, what the agenda is and just a brief overview of what, to kind of refresh your memory regarding the budget, but I'm sure you all have studied. So we will look at FY '26, some highlights. The PFM is here to give us a bond update. Weston will come up and do our financial policy review, and then Dr. Acuff will come up and do a summary of the budget research update, noting that we will be having more in-depth sessions about that. So if you go to the next slide, please. So as a reminder, our FY '26 budget overview, which is this current fiscal year, that is our operating budget, which is $390 million, and then our capital budget is $61 million. Next slide. I do want to note that I used AI to make this slide. It was very exciting. So it looks different from all the rest, but it asked that I want to beautify the slides. I thought, sure, and came up with this. But our budget highlights, and council, you should be very proud of yourselves and working with the administration, that we prioritize employees with competitive wages and benefits. We prioritize public safety and also prioritize infrastructure. Next slide, please. So for employees, we continued the implementation of the Gallagher study. For some of our newer council members, this was a study that Mayor Kelly implemented upon coming in 2021 to level out our pay, because there were people that had been with the city for 10, 15 years, never had a pay raise, never anything. So this now, with this implementation of this, and it was approved by council, and we were able to move that into our budget. So the last couple of budget seasons, we've been teeter-tottering back and forth between, are we gonna give a pay raise to sworn, non-sworn, and things of that nature. And through our last budget session, we were able to do both, and moving forward, we'll be able to do both. So this allows for competitive wages and puts us in a position for strength as we enter FY '27. So good job, great job to council for actually being able to stabilize this portion of our budget. Next slide, please. For public safety stability, we prioritize public safety, stability, and resilience. We improve recruitment and retention. You heard Chief Chambers talk about the largest academy class since 2013. In 2024, we had a vacancy of 23% in 2024 to now 0% plus 8 today. So that's a good space. Again, that goes to show those investments that were made. So thank you to Chattanoogans, thank you to this council. And for the fire department, they are hitting their retention goals. They are keeping talent, because I don't know if you were aware, but there was a very high chance of a mass exodus if we did not fix this teeter-totter we were doing. Plus, we are recruiting new talent, so we're in a good place here. And then finally, next slide, please. And these, again, are just highlights. There are many other things that happened, but these are some of the highlights of that what has happened in the FY '26 budget. We prioritize infrastructure, so the Wilcox Boulevard Bridge, we're seeing investments in that, and PFM may mention that today. We have a landfill expansion as well as continued paving investments. And thank you, Jay, for the information. We're looking at, for this fiscal year, paving roughly 58 paving miles. So we are excited about that. So council, we've done the work. And so all these policies that we're getting ready to look at really help us continue in doing that right work, the research, the policies, and all these things. So I wanted to give that brief overview as we got started with this presentation. And I will, if the administration, is Kevin in here? Yes, Kevin, did you want to add to this at all?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. So with that, we'll get into our updated financial policies with Weston, if you could. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Council. Weston Porter, CFO here at the city. I just want to take a few minutes today to provide an update on some policies that we've been working on in finance and in conjunction with administration. I'm going to skip through these. So just kind of a quick overview summary. During FY25, the city engaged the Government Finance Officers Association, or GFOA, to help us prepare a detailed analysis of our fund balance levels and where we were with that. And as a part of that discussion and as a part of their analysis, they had a recommendation that we formalize and adopt a number of policies. And so at the request of Chairwoman Hill, we started to work on that, and that's been 9 months maybe or so now that we've been working on these back and forth in the midst of passing a budget and everything else. And so we're going to present some of those today and kind of start the conversation. So the 4 policies that GFOA outlined were the one-time revenue policy, volatile revenue, structural balance budget policy, and fund balance reserve. I do want to kind of preface the rest of this discussion by saying that these policies outline a number of great budgetary things and practices, most all of which the city was already doing. These policies just kind of codify that and put it into a formal written document. But again, most of these things you'll see are things that we've been doing throughout the budget process for the last number of years. So we'll jump into the first one, which is a one-time revenue policy. And what this policy is, it's designed to limit the use of non-recurring revenues to one-time non-recurring expenditures or to pay down liabilities. So when we're talking about one-time revenues, we're looking at things like donations, the proceeds of sales of assets or property, settlements from legal cases or things like that, and then one-time federal, state, and revenue allocations. The policy also outlines kind of what we can do with these. These one-time revenues we can use for capital improvement projects, paying down debt, including the pension like we did in FY25, replenishment of any kind of reserve deficit that we may have. But what we can't do with these one-time revenues is use them to fund ongoing regular operations. And then each of these slides as we go through the policy documents here is going to kind of outline what we need from council. And pretty much all of them are just require you guys to look at them. Like we have one here kind of every 4 years so that each new council person will get a crack at it and be able to kind of refresh. And ultimately, we're trying to ensure that these policies remain in line with the city's objectives to exercise fiscal responsibility. Whoa. There it is. The next policy we'll look at is volatile revenue policy. This policy is designed to treat extraordinarily high annual revenues from volatile sources as one-time revenues and limit the use of these revenues to one-time, non-recurring expenditures to pay down liabilities. And essentially what this is doing, interest is a great example of kind of what we're talking about here. Depending on how much cash we have on hand or what the markets are doing, interest could range anywhere, say, from $5 million to $10 million a year. And what we don't want to do is take the high end of that and fund ongoing operations that when that comes back down to normal, we're left with this deficit. So what this policy kind of outlines is you set a baseline, a 3-year, 5-year average, whatever makes sense for that particular revenue source. And then anything in excess of that baseline is treated as a one-time revenue. So it would revert back to that one-time revenue policy. Again, interest is kind of the clearest example of how that would work. Again, well, can we use these 4 volatile revenues that increment, say our baseline for interest is $6 million, but we bring in $10 million in a given year, that $4 million would be treated as a one-time revenue that we could use for capital projects, paying down debt, funding the reserve if need be, things like that. We will continue to monitor these volatile revenue sources throughout the year and report back with any issues or concerning trends that we see. And again, what's needed from council, just a review of the policy every so often, just to make sure that it continues to align with our priorities. There it is. All right. The next policy is a structurally balanced budget policy. The state requires us to pass a balanced budget. What it doesn't require us to do is to make sure that that budget is structurally balanced. So essentially, a government in Tennessee can pass a budget that is balanced using one-time revenue sources that would create structural deficits within the budget in future years. So what this policy does is it commits the city to balancing its recurring revenues and recurring expenditures without including those one-time revenues. And this is to help prevent any kind of structural deficits that might occur in the budget. So again, a structurally balanced budget is a budget where recurring revenues are sufficient to cover recurring expenditures. How do we develop a structurally balanced budget? This is done using well-reasoned conservative revenue projections and balancing that against departmental budgets that focus on recurring expenditures and prioritizing operational needs over one-time spending. This policy also addresses debt and capital funding. Capital improvements will continue to be funded using the appropriate sources, whether it be bonds, pay-as-you-go, the one-time revenues that we talked about earlier, things like that nature. And debt service will also continue to be funded using stable recurring revenue sources like property taxes. Two things on this one needed from council, things we're already doing. Review annually, discuss and adopt a budget that is structurally balanced and make sure that we don't inadvertently end up with a structural deficit in our budget. Again, things we're doing already, but this just kind of codifies that. And then review the policy every 4 years. This last policy, certainly not least, is our fund balance reserve policy. City actually does have an existing fund balance reserve policy. It was adopted back in, I think, 2006. It sets the target at 15% of revenues. This new policy, this is, again, was kind of at the crux of what GFOA was tasked with doing, was helping us kind of figure out where we needed to fall when it comes to our general fund balance reserve. This policy sets the range 20 to 30%. General best practice is 17%. That's the state, that's GFOA. Best practice municipal finance is around that 17% mark. But what GFOA did is they did a kind of a 10-year outlook to say, if we ran into an economic downturn, a major tornado or flood event, a global pandemic, where did we need to be to get some level of confidence that we would not fall below the 17% mark? And so the 20 to 30% kind of gives us an 80 to 90% confidence that if we run into one of those situations, we won't fall below 17%. Because if you set it at 17% and you have a big economic downturn, you're going to fall below it. So we kind of overshoot it to give us some cushion in that. Currently, we ended FY25, June 30, 2025, at 27.7% and did not budget to use any fund balance reserve in the FY26 budget. What can we use reserves for? It's outlined in the policy as being used to address unexpected revenue shortfalls, emergencies, payment of debt, and one-time capital items. Again, it cannot be used to cover ongoing operational costs such as salaries or other recurring expenses that would compromise the structural integrity of the budget. How will excess funds be handled? Similar to what happened last spring, if it's determined that fund balance has exceeded kind of that level, administration and finance would work together to bring a proposal to you, this body, and you guys would have an opportunity to discuss it and pass it to use them in one of these appropriate manners. And again, the last thing we needed on this is just to review it every so often to make sure that it continues to align with what we're trying to do. And that's my overview of the policies we're working on. And any questions?
Yes, all right. Yes, we have a couple of questions. Perfect. Councilman Elliott, followed by Madam Chair Hill, and then Councilman Henderson, I believe.
Hey, Weston, I just have one question. Sure. Will you guys be bringing, and you probably already said this, but I just want to clarify. Will you all be bringing this before us to codify this?
Yes.
Okay, that's it. That's all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Elliott. Madam Chair Hill.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited that we are at this point, and Chairwoman Dotley, thank you very much for shepherding this. Couple of specific questions. The one-time revenue policy, restrictions and use. One-time revenue should not, it reads as follows, one-time revenue should not be used for regular operating expenses such as salaries and benefits, routine maintenance, or other ongoing costs that would create ongoing financial obligation. So my question is about not being able to use a one-time revenue for routine maintenance, knowing that we have so much opportunity for maintenance. If we were to have a windfall, why would we limit ourselves from, for example, painting pedestrian crosswalks?
Sure, so I think the idea is not to budget to use these things, so if we had,
In building the budget?
that's right, that's
We
right.
wouldn't plan
It
that
kind of goes
way.
back to that structural integrity of it, but we can add some specific language to kind of like
Okay,
carve that.
just something to
that sort of
consider, because,
scenario,
yeah,
yeah.
I understand if, we wouldn't have had the windfall or the one-time revenue. Okay, okay. The, that structurally balanced looks great. Volatile revenues. I have a question under item 5, risk mitigation and diversification. I thought it was an excellent thing to consider as part of this policy, but I wondered what the thought process is on the third bullet. Quote, "The city will also consider establishing long-term partnerships, endowments, or grants that help stabilize revenue." Can you give me some examples of what you guys are thinking about with that?
So I think this is kind of, and I failed to mention this when I started. We developed these policies using, GFOA has what's called a policy challenge, where they take policies from across the country and they put them all kind of in one hub, and you're able to log in and pull kind of these, and that was something that we pulled from a number of municipalities that had a similar verbiage in theirs, and it was just a good idea. We haven't really nailed down exactly how we're going to do that, but I think considering just some of the long-term partnerships with a lot of the groups here in town and the philanthropic groups, and how can we partner with different folks, it was just something kind of to explore a little bit further that we hadn't considered. So
Okay.
it was an opportunity to us to pull from other municipalities and see maybe
Okay.
there's something that we haven't been doing.
All right, so
we
that
could
is
be doing.
something we could learn from
Yeah.
other folks. Okay.
For sure.
And that was my last question. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Weston, going back to the volatile revenue policy, before we codify, now you've given some examples and it says, but not limited to, will we actually list all of the revenue that we feel like is the volatile revenue and also establish a baseline for those before we codify?
I don't think we can add to the list, but I don't think we'd want to call it the list, because if something were to come up that changes in a number of years, then we'd have to go back and readdress the policy. We can certainly look at it, though, and make it a more comprehensive list. But I think the idea of leaving it open-ended was there just may be something we just haven't thought about or just hasn't come up yet that would then require us to come back and amend the policy to include it or not. But
Well, the only reason I bring that up is because of the history of the years I've been serving on the council. Sometimes, we'll ask, what about this? Oh, well, that's,
Gotcha.
I just felt like if we had something very defined, we would know what's volatile, what's not volatile, so that if we bring up, what about this? We're not going to get the answer, oh, we've decided that's volatile.
Okay.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yes, yes, definitely.
And then establish a baseline
Baseline.
for all of these volatile revenues. The second thing, I want to go to the fund balance. And I had spoken to you, I don't know, a week or so ago about
Yes.
the ability to be able to create a strategic gold reserve. Did you find out whether that's something that we can do as a city or not?
As far as taking this reserve that we're setting apart and investing it.
Well,
Kind of in a
and so
separate-
what I guess, and I'm just talking out loud.
Yeah.
Right here, we've got a range of 20 to 30%. If we allocated a percentage of that range, of say 5% to a strategic gold reserve, that sort of, in my opinion, holds the value. The feds have just announced they're going to start quantitative easing, and which will continue to devalue our dollar. So as those dollars sit in those accounts, it's quite possible that they're not going to be earning the interest or return on investments, that we're going to start seeing the devaluation of those dollars. Whereas as the dollar devaluates, gold typically continues to rise or holds its value.
Sure.
So I guess what I would like for this council to entertain, or even the administration, is possibly creating a certain percentage of our unreserved fund balance to go to a strategic gold reserve so that we have some assurance that our dollars are maintaining their value.
Sure. And what we can do is we can add to this policy kind of an investment line item, maybe number 8 or whatever number it would end up being, and bring to you guys as we continue this conversation some options of here's how we could potentially do something like that. And,
Yeah.
and we can add that to this.
Okay.
Definitely.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, that's all my questions.
Okay, thank you.
For now.
Oh, thank you, Councilman Henderson. And you were saying gold, like the rock. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, I thought you said gold. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Councilman Elliott. Okay.
Yeah, this is a clarifier to Councilman Henderson. Like, so do we actually buy this gold? And like, I don't know how it works, so you have to excuse me. Like, do we build our own Fort Knox? I ain't even trying to be funny here.
I mean,
You got plenty of room over there in that homestead, so I don't know, do we bury it over there or?
I would rather see physical gold certificates, that way we know that we actually got the metal.
Okay.
And yeah, maybe that, it's something else to consider, but I just think going forward, we need to look at something that would kind of help stabilize the dollars that we have in those reserves, because just sitting there, they devalue every year and they're worth less. But, as those dollars go down, it's typically gone up in value. If we can talk more about that.
Okay. Thanks, sir. That's all, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you so much, Councilman Elliott. So, council, with that, we'll continue to work with finance, work with Weston, and try to bring some policies to you early March for us to vote on, and it would just be a resolution, right? And whatever we vote on, we'll use as a basis for, basis for our FY27 budget. So that'll be coming up. So just keep that in mind, and thank you so much, Weston. And are you going to introduce PFM?
Sure.
Okay.
I think they have a slide deck if Rick will pull it up, and PFM is here. We closed on our bonds last week, so they're going to just give a general update on how that went, how the process went, and kind of the results of that.
Thank you.
One other thing, Weston, we also have a report on the agenda tonight, and that is a report that we've sent to the state. At this point, it's required by law, correct?
That's correct. So the report under other business is a report we're required to file with the state. It's been filed by Bass, Berry, Sims, our bond counsel, and it's just an informational item. There's really no action to take or anything to do with it. It outlines kind of the proceeds and where everything went and the closing costs and all of that information, a lot of which Lauren Lowe is about to go over from PFM. And that item is just informational only. It's required by law to be presented to you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Lauren.
All right, good afternoon. I will control the slides here. Please make sure if I flip by, if you missed something, let me know. I'm happy to go back. My name is Lauren Lowe. I'm a managing director at PFM. We serve as the independent financial advisor to the city. So I'll give a quick overview of the transaction that Weston mentioned that did close last week. So the city issued 2026 general obligation bonds. This provided $40 million of capital expenditures that were part of the FY25 and 26 budget process. The bonds were sold at a premium, so we actually borrowed $35.4 million. We worked with the administration to structure the bonds. We factored in the budget process, the affordability, the expected credit rating of the city, as well as current market conditions. We did work directly with city finance to prepare responses to the rating agency's questions. The city has a Fitch and S&P rating, and that process resulting in affirming the city's credit ratings of AA+ by Fitch and AAA by S&P. The market conditions the day prior to the sale were somewhat volatile, given news articles and things that are outside of our control. However, when we stepped back and looked at the market conditions, which BVAL is an index that we use to track tax-exempt bonds like the city issued, they actually were better off than when we had started this process. So a reference point is in mid-December, when we met with the rating agencies, the market actually improved or had gone down 0.06 to 0.21% in interest rates. That is still factoring in the volatility that occurred the day prior to pricing. Based on our independent review of going into the bond pricing, we actually estimate that the city priced 0.04% to 0.15% better than we had independently evaluated. So for context, general obligation debt in Tennessee, when it's the first time you borrow general obligation debt, it must be sold at competitive public sale. So prior to that bond offering, PFM contacted approximately 40 underwriting firms to get feedback about the market conditions, the city's bond sale, and really answer any questions they may have. Questions usually are, can you send me, the S&P rating report, things of that nature. On the day of the sale, we did have 17 bidders signed up. I tried to manage everybody's expectations that we might not get all 17, and to my incorrect reference, we did get all 17 bids, so it was a very favorable process. The result was PNC was the lowest true interest cost provider at a 2.976%. PFM independently verified all of those bids to the right, all 17 of them, which required us to do 2 sets of structuring, but we did it. And we just noted how aggressive the bids were when you look at PNC kind of going down that list. In fact, the next bid was 0.003%. comparative to the winning bid. So we took this as a very strong process that the city undertook. So as a recap, after the issuance of the debt, prior to going into the 2026 bond issue, we had about $120 million of outstanding debts associated with the city's general improvement bond, so anything related to sort of general capital needs for the city. After the issuance, we had about $156 million, so we provided to you as a graphic to sort of see the blue bars represent existing debt payments and where we have layered in the future debt payments associated with the 26 bonds. As the city attorney noted, there is an item in your packet related to, it's called the Comptroller's Report on Debt Obligation. We often refer to as a short term as just state debt report. It is a non-voting informational item, must be provided to the governing body within 45 days of closing. It is on file in our electronic format at the Comptroller's office and also accessible for the public. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, council, any questions for PFM? All right, Lauren, you did a great job, no questions.
Good,
All right,
congratulations.
thank you. All right, but I know it'll be questions for our next one. Dr. Acuff? Come on up. Very excited. And as a reminder, council, he's gonna give an overview, and then we will also have additional in-depth sessions regarding this as well. Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody again.
Good to see you too.
So like Chairwoman Dudley mentioned, I just want to give a brief overview of sort of what I've been working on in the draft report. And I will kind of walk you through some of the high points. Some of this I may be preaching to the choir just a little bit, so I'm happy to skip over some parts, but stop me at any point if you'd like, and I'm happy to answer questions or engage in discussion, et cetera. I will briefly kind of tell you the high points I was going to touch on. So A, the focus is on mostly general fund revenues and expenditures. So obviously that's the biggest chunk of governmental funds. That's most of what you all consider, I think, on a weekly, yearly basis, et cetera. I did some revenue and expenditure forecasts based on those. A look at the fiduciary funds, aka pension funds. And then we had talked about developing some measures of fiscal health and other kind of performance measures. So those are kind of the highlights of what I'm presenting now. And again, there's sort of an ongoing draft that I'm working on. So I'm happy to consider other points and answer other questions. My general caveats, I'll give my good legal disclaimer. So this is not legal or financial advice. And these are just my opinions, not state, UTC, anybody else. This is just me. So I will say too, any mistakes are mine. I've caught a couple, and I think others that have given me feedback have caught a couple. So thanks to finance and grants and HR and the folks at the pension fund and others that have helped me along the way. But I want to make sure that anything I say that's wrong is me. And again, I'm looking for your feedback as we go. So general caveats. So big picture. If you go back, way back to 2001, just kidding. So I looked back, actually back to the 90s. I was just curious in kind of overall general trends in spending in terms of general fund expenditures and revenue sources kind of as we go. So I've looked both at general spending and revenue sources, both in terms of nominal dollars, basically like the dollars that came in then, the dollars went out then, also in terms of inflation-adjusted dollars. So the nominal dollars, basically the dollars that came in and out are on the bottom lines. You can see in red and green, and then the top line is basically the inflation-adjusted dollars. So I know you all have probably heard this a lot and heard it last budget season, et cetera, but if you consider inflation-adjusted dollars, both revenues and expenditures, obviously the line becomes a lot more flat over the last even 25 years. Obviously, some of the spikes you can see basically due to, recessions, pandemics, short-term funding things that, potentially things that Weston was talking about with, hey, we have a bunch of extra money this year, we're going to fund an extra $10, $20 million in capital projects or something like that. So some of those spikes are due to those where especially you see expenditures exceed revenues in terms of both of those lines there. But I just want to give you a kind of overall big picture of kind of where we were and where we're going. Just as a recap, again, you all will probably hear this much more. So since the annual audit was hot off the presses as of end of December, I figured I would give you just a brief rundown of what you all ended up with in fiscal '25. So I want to talk about revenue sources, particularly those that are the most important to general fund and also those that arguably are under most of the control of council. So one, your biggest one obviously is property taxes. I know there's lots of discussions about this. The last budget season, there's discussions about this every year. But again, in terms of general fund revenues, almost half of your money comes just from property taxes. Below that is sales taxes, general fund sales taxes, as well as state shared sales taxes that come as a per capita allocation from the state. And then those sales taxes that you designate to economic development purposes that the city basically has assigned for those. So all told, in terms of those top sort of revenue sources, if you look at property taxes plus those different sales tax categories, you're talking over 3/4 of your revenues come just from those two essentially items. So property taxes, sales taxes, vastly important. So again, I think a lot of the discussions obviously surround those two things, and I think obviously that's just because of the nature of how much they make up. There's a few other things on here, obviously, that you all have maybe less control over, intergovernmental revenues, grants, funding from the Fed, state, et cetera. And then we can talk about briefly or in ongoing conversations about some of the other local taxes and revenue sources. Just as a caveat or a preview, whatever, before we get into it, a lot of these revenue sources, even going back 20, 30 years, have remained pretty flat. So again, these aren't like high dollar items, but dollars and cents, these things add up. So I think those are potentially things that you all could look for in terms of shoring up some of the current city operations. And then miscellaneous revenue is things like investments and other things like that. So all told, general fund again was $391 million and change this past fiscal year. Since we're talking about property tax revenue, so this is just basically a valuation, basically showing the increases in property tax revenue in terms of assessed value that contributes to that property tax revenue over the last basically 20 fiscal years. So you see those lines where it goes up are basically those reassessment years, with the exception of the 2013 reappraisals when the rate was kept flat at the certified rate. But other than that, generally, as you see, those spikes ended up being usually those every 4 years, or as I call them, the quadrennial cycles, where you all get reassessed and then adjust the rate accordingly. Again, this can be a point of ongoing conversation, but I think just the nature of the unique way that Chattanooga's elections fall and that the reassessment cycle happens is that, any 4 or 8 year cycle, there's a new administration or there's a second term administration, there's some new council members coming in those every 4 years. And so as opposed to a lot of other cities in Tennessee, it puts you on a unique cycle where it's like, hey, we just got this reassessment, you need to consider this new rate, and boom, you're off to the races, within your first couple of weeks, months, or whatever of assuming office in some cases. As a, addition to that, there are a lot of times where a new administration or new council members have priorities for their districts, for the city as a whole, et cetera. So that's when you oftentimes reconsider those big policy shifts, those new investments and initiatives and things like that. So thinking about how that looks over time or incrementally potentially is something that you may want to consider. Some other things to put on your radar too, the states, in terms of certain policies that either have been implemented or that are certainly under consideration right now. One thing that was passed last year was a new formula for calculating state share sales tax revenue. So again, this was allocated per capita. The change in that is that you can now rely on the Boyd Center for Economic Research up at UT Knoxville. They're doing basically year-to-year projections of population and growth. So as opposed to previous years where maybe it was just a decennial census and cities were complaining that it wasn't capturing higher growth rates, that's one change that they've made this year, that they're going to supposedly start that on July 1 of 26, so going into fiscal year 27, basically. Another one that's come up the last couple of years, so this is just a consideration, this is not obviously passed or been adopted, is the either elimination or limitations on sales tax on groceries. So again, since this is, currently under consideration, again, it has been passed, it could be amended, who knows, but this is another revenue item that is big, obviously, for cities in terms of sales taxes on groceries. Whether it's just the state portion that's eliminated, whether that trickles down to the municipalities and counties. Obviously, there are a lot of places that rely on sales taxes on groceries for revenue items. So that's another one to kind of keep your eye on as we go through this legislation and potentially other legislative sessions as we go. And the other big one, obviously, your largest general fund revenue source, property taxes. So for the last few sessions, there have been discussions of property tax caps. The background on this, and some of you probably already know this, is Tennessee is one of the only few states that does not have a cap on year-to-year incremental increases in property taxes in terms of revenue. And so there's been discussions over putting a cap on that. The city averages sort of like a natural growth of about 1.5%, 2% per year in terms of new construction, new development, et cetera. So that's kind of what you're looking at if you were not able to then increase after a reassessment cycle. But most of the recent proposals that you're looking at generally put it at about 2%. So again, this is still under debate. This may not be passed, but I'm just kind of giving you a heads up to kind of look for this as you go into budget season, kind of considering your largest general fund revenue source. Is most of the formulas look at 2% plus inflation plus previous year's growth at the previous year's rate. So some of the projections I've done that are in the report and will be in obviously the final report basically do a analysis of kind of what that would look like. I even went back in time, starting back in the 90s, to say, hey, if you'd done this, basically maxing out that max cap, what it would look like. So again, some of those things we can talk about sort of as we go through budget season and today, if you'd like. The other kind of like item on that is that if you did need to include additional revenue sources for whatever reason, again, some catastrophe or some event happened that you really needed to, is that it would go to a referendum for the people. So basically, some people would have to vote on an increase that would raise the revenue above that limit. So just giving you a preview of kind of some of the things that I know a lot of cities are keeping on their radar as we're going into this legislative session and this budget year. Just based on current property taxes and growth, et cetera, I've kind of done 3 different scenarios. So those are based on one, sort of just like the natural growth that you see. That's sort of in the projected side. That's sort of the bottom green line. The blue in the middle is sort of following the pattern that the city has taken. And again, it's not just this council or previous council. It's pretty much been a trend going back to the 90s, is that most increases in the property tax rate and revenues has come every 4 years following that reappraisal cycle. I think there are only about 2 to 3 years where that rate was changed in sort of those intersessional years in between those reappraisal cycles. So most of the time the reappraisal comes in, you all capture that natural growth over the next 3 years, and then there's a reassessment, and then it's reconsidered with new councils and new administrations. So that middle line is sort of the every 4 years increase in incremental revenue that comes from that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, is I assume sort of the maximum that you could do in terms of revenues with the tax cap. So that's the top line. So if you were actually to max out the 2% plus growth plus previous year's growth, that's what that would look like. So those are kind of 3 different scenarios looking at sort of I would say probably the low end of revenue growth in terms of property taxes if you just captured that natural growth over the year or year to year, and then sort of the top that if you were to consider adopting sort of the max cap, if that legislation were to be passed, that's sort of the top line there. Also look at sales tax revenues, and again, Weston mentioned these are somewhat volatile. So again, this is another one to obviously consider and keep your eye on. So these are just a look back for the last basically 20 fiscal years, which are on here. The the line on there indicates the year that the city and the county ended their sales tax agreement. The current sales tax rate goes back to 2004, so before that, the city took in a lot more in terms of sales taxes. So those have been adjusted over the years. But generally, we see about a 2.5% increase in the last 10 fiscal years, basically in sales tax increases. The other things to consider, again, in terms of policy recommendations, you do have the ability to go up just a little bit, half a percentage point in terms of sales tax revenue. So a number of cities have looked at this in terms of general sales tax increases and/or surcharges. So Nashville just passed one focused on transit. Knoxville just considered one that failed. Memphis passed one several years ago that was dedicated revenue for their fire and police pension fund. So there are additional revenue opportunities that could come from sales taxes, in addition to the surcharge that the state has now authorized under the IMPROVE Act. There's a lot of other revenue stuff that'll be in the draft report and the final report. Another thing that I mentioned earlier is a lot of the fines, fees, licenses, et cetera, have remained pretty flat over the years. And so I've mentioned this in previous settings and other reports and things like that. But one example I've used in the past is the motor vehicle license fee. So, and I appreciate also, I should give a shout out to Nicole and the clerk staff for researching this with me a while back, is the original ordinance went into effect in 1943, imposing a $5 basically city sticker. Yeah. So 1943 was when the $5 sticker, those of you that have been around for a while, remember the little stickers you used to put in the front of your windshield. Now they're paid through the county when you go renew your tag. But it's been $5 since the 40s. That's one that has not gone up. Now, again, the nuance around this is originally part of this was for commercial vehicles, especially ones that are coming out from Georgia, that were using city streets and infrastructure and things like that, putting wear and tear on our roads. And then it extended to passenger vehicles. There were several lawsuits over the years that challenged sort of the nature of this fee. And so again, there's a sort of caveat in city code and some of those resulting lawsuits. And again, I can, for city attorney, you can correct me on any of these, but basically the courts and precedent says that basically you can't use these as general revenue, raising. They have to be dedicated to specific purposes. So same thing generally goes for all types of licenses and fees. You can't just use them for general revenue increases that go to other projects. They have to be sort of tied to and justifiable through the amount of money you spend either on infrastructure or in other cases of license and fees, the amount of money that's spent on, staff work, labor, materials, things like that. So you have to be able to justify these fees. But again, that's another opportunity if you all to consider in terms of increasing funding in certain creative ways. Looking at some of the peer cities, so Memphis, Shelby County, if you're a resident in Memphis, you pay both. It's $135 total. National Davidson's $55, Knox County's $36. They don't have municipal, they just have a county. But those are some kind of peer and comparison cities. So again, this could bring in an additional amount of revenue every year. I think in '25, it was about $400,000 in change that came in. I've done the back of the napkin math. Not everybody is paying this fee. So, those of you that have gone and renewed your tag in person, sometimes there's a little bit of a wink when they're like, hey, do you want to pay the city sticker? Yeah. So anyway, but I would say not every vehicle in the city of Chattanooga has paid that fee. I know the city's worked with CARTA and others to try to incentivize that this past year in terms of parking and other things, but that's just an example of some of those things. On the other side of the equation, so expenditures, again, I'll try not to belabor this too much, but looking at expenditures for 2025, I know y'all just talked about expenditures for 26 and going into 27 now. Again, generally your top expenditure categories in any year for any municipality that has these functions, fire, police, public works, generally, again, the biggest investment basically the city makes is in people. Local government is a service-heavy job. And so those are generally your largest departments. A lot of that is, the majority of those budgets are payroll and your people that are serving the city. General government is also in there. And again, that's over the years generally a catch-all category. In addition to obviously lots of functions of the city, that's also money that you all spend giving to other agencies and contractors and things like that, nonprofits that provide other services for the city. Beyond that, Parks and Outdoors, Economic Development are some of the other top ones. So I've tried to break it down into the big line item categories that you all see generally when you look at the budget. Transfers is the other big one this year. And again, with Weston's presentation earlier, I know the policies you all are considering working on, some of the stabilization funds, those shoring up some of the basically unassigned fund balance and things like that generally were in there, but putting a little more parameters around how you use those were some of the big transfers this year. As y'all were discussing earlier, also the one-time fee, shoring up some of the pension funds, capital projects, paying down debt, stuff like that. So transfers this year were very large, but those are also pretty big investments that are out of the ordinary for any given fiscal year. So those were pretty big investments this year that came out of that budget. So generally the transfers won't be that large, but basically that's the net transfers that came in and out of the general fund this year. And so putting all those things together, basically I projected revenues and expenditures based on those different categories of revenues. So you can kind of see that here. Again, we can discuss these going forward, and you obviously have these conversations as you all go forward. But, just capturing year-to-year growth probably, would not keep up with the current rates of expenditures. But at the same time, obviously, any given budget year, these things are adjusted up or down. Again, these would include transfers and things like that. So that's kind of coming off that line, sort of what you're seeing. So again, those things obviously go up and down in any given year. So that's part of the budgeting process. But I just want to kind of show you the overall long-term projections. Okay, before I move on, I would say I'll entertain questions about any of that stuff.
Third.
Oh, I'm sorry. That graph actually I don't think is in the report. Actually, I just put that together. Sorry. Well, it's in the slide. Sorry. No, it's fine. Well, the tables are in there. The tables with the revenue and the expenditure projections are in there. I just put the graph together for purposes of the presentation. Yeah, sorry about that. I'll update those as we go. Obviously, the three different scenarios. The departmental expenditure forecast. That's on page 16 of the report. And then the three revenue forecast options, those start on page 10 of the report. So I basically just kind of smushed those together essentially.
You can continue on. I'm sorry. We'll just capture questions at the end.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. All right, fiduciary funds. All right, so the two big ones I looked at, I did not look at other post-employment benefits. I did not look, obviously, at component units like EPB and others that are part of your overall funding, but generally out of the purview of general governmental operations. So fire and police pension funds. So one of the big measures that we look at in terms of sort of fiscal health and performance measures is the funding ratio. So basically, those long-term liabilities relative to the net position, or basically assets that the fund has. The end of this year, it went up to 63%. I know based on our discussions last time I was here, the target has been about 60%. Is getting that up from the mid-50s. So back to fiscal year 24, it was 56%. So obviously it came up, but particularly that one-time investment. I know one of the things to look for, obviously, is that since there was a pretty large increase in pay this year, that will likely bring that ratio down some. So again, I mentioned this last time I was here, that caveats that this was not an actuarial analysis. They have better data than I do. But I was looking more kind of at the fund level. I was looking basically at trends, looking at the overall net position and liabilities, the number of participants paying into it, things of that nature. So obviously I would defer to those folks when they come and present the findings to you from the past year and kind of going into this year about contribution rates and things of that nature. But based on the overall trends is I would expect over the next few years, or however you all might choose to do this, if you wanted to bring it up to 60%, could potentially require another $10 to $20 million. And again, that's just based on large projections, sort of at the fund level. Again, that's not necessarily considering some of the more granular data that the actuaries kind of take into account there. Some of the other things that have come up, basically, actually, I'll save this for the next couple slides, but I basically did a forecast, which is in your report, of both of those. So that kind of shows you the the big picture of kind of where those trends were. The liabilities are definitely a lot more stable in terms of predicted versus actual values. But the net position, basically the returns and things like that, have obviously gone up and down a lot. So again, I hope I'm not misrepresenting anybody, but based on conversations I had and being able to sit in on some of the board meetings and things of that nature, I know that a lot of the previous funding policies obviously have been changed and are a lot more stable now. Obviously, with recessions and pandemics and things like that, that adds a lot more volatility to markets. And I know there's been a pretty hefty decrease in the expected rate of return, basically the discount rate, over the last basically 20 years or so. So used to sort of assume, I think it was in the 8.5% range rate of return. Now it's down in the sixes. I think it's 6.75. As you all discussed with bond ratings and things like that, I think Fitch assumes like a 6%. The fund has always performed better than that generally, particularly if you look smoothed over time and not just year to year. But I think there's a sort of bigger push from rating agencies and others to be a little more bearish on the market in terms of what our expected rate of returns are. And so that inherently makes your city contributions go up because it assumes less interest rates being earned over time. And so that basically increases the contribution in any given year. So again, I would defer to the experts on that, but those are sort of just my sort of big picture looks at those. The other thing is, again, back to the funding ratios. So, 60% was the targets, and again, that's not totally arbitrary. The comptroller and others have certain thresholds they look at when they look at funding ratios. I know 60%, basically, it's once it dips below that, it disallows you from making certain changes to benefits and things of that nature. So 60% certainly has been, I think, certainly is, still the minimum target. But just to provide some context, I pulled data from a number of sources, including Census Bureau and other surveys that look at different pension funds. And generally, it seems like the ballpark is, let's say, between 75 and 80% funding. This is on another slide and in the report, there's sort of a general rule that most people want it to be around 80%. Actuaries would say we want it to be 100%, but looking at the nationwide averages in our region around us, generally it's in the 75 to 80% range in terms of funding ratios. So that's just to give you a little bit of context. Another question that I know that I received from members is about the number of participants in the funds. So this was, again, I pulled these from the Acuffs over the last couple of years. And generally, these are lagged by a year in terms of the financial reporting. But this kind of shows you the number of folks paying into the pension fund versus beneficiaries pulling out and the inactive members. And so a couple of years ago, this basically sort of flipped, I guess, in terms of number of beneficiaries sort of outpacing the number of active members. And again, a lot of that is, demographic challenges, recruitment challenges, other things too. So again, I think over time, I don't think these are necessarily big problems, but at the same time, I know that certainly those are things that folks are looking at. So I just wanted to present those numbers in sort of a comprehensive table. And again, I would defer the longer term projections to our actuarial friends. Give you some context for some of those numbers. So in Tennessee, only 10% basically of pensions have more active members than beneficiaries. So we were not out of the norm in terms of Tennessee. We're seeing that mostly in terms of peers in Tennessee. In the South, about a third, a little bit less than a third of pensions have more active members than beneficiaries. Even nationally, these are generally lopsided. So again, these are general demographic trends we're seeing. Similar to what we see with Social Security, other benefits, things like that. These are general trends we're seeing in terms of demographics of pension systems. Again, baby boomers and others have been retiring. Not as many people are coming in behind them. And so a lot of these pensions are a little bit upside down. But again, over time, with earnings, with smart investments, with other things like that, I don't think these are necessarily big challenges, but obviously those are things that you wanted to monitor and obviously things you need to consider additional investments in year to year as you all have other monies left over. Same thing for general pension, which still has more active members than current beneficiaries. So in terms of just sheer numbers, the general pension fund, not the fire police pension fund, but general pension fund has more active employees paying into it than pulling out of it. And again, I've done similar forecasts for those. So again, the fire and police pension, I'd projected, potentially being back in the mid 50s, up to 60 with a more advantageous projection. Considering the new pay structure and things like that, the general pension would still probably hover around the 80% mark, which it's traditionally been somewhere between 75 and 80%. So those are those projections. I've kind of talked through all these, so I won't belabor these. But basically, this is just, considering a funding policy, if you want to consider something above 60%, if you want to consider 80%. Again, actuaries would say 100% is the goal. But certainly, I think 60% is the minimum, and something above that could be something that you all consider as a city going forward. And then finally, one last point on that one. Sorry, I meant to mention this. The other thing I was going to mention too, in terms of just, policies and approaches to funding and payroll and things like that, I think the more you take an incremental approach, the sort of easier these things are to look at. So again, instead of waiting those 4 or 6 so years, in between making these big bumps and pay raises, obviously will help sort of the long-term projections on those things and add a little bit more stability to that. So whether, again, it's sworn employees, non-sworn, general governmental employees, I think sort of an incremental raise structure and pay structure would certainly be worth considering, both in terms of general recruitment and things like that, but also, just keeping up with inflation and pensions and stuff like that. Okay, last section, and then I will certainly entertain questions and feedback. So measures of fiscal health. So there's a number of these, and we kind of talked about these a little bit last time I was here. City of Chattanooga obviously uses some of these, so Office of Internal Audit uses a 10-point test based on various ratios and analyses that they do every year, comparing us to cities, to benchmark cities. And so there are multiple ways to look at some of these. Nashville uses a modified version of ICMA's financial trend monitoring system. There's what's called Brown's 10-point test. It's another 10-point test that also compares cities to other cities. And then there's a number of academic and municipal and statewide sort of monitoring systems and scorecards that people use. So, the number of cities, almost, there's a number of metrics out there you can use. So, and sort of whittling these down, this was sort of my question to you all is about what's useful and what you all would like to see in developing some of these. So I can kind of walk through a couple of these, and we can consider certain ones going forward. So A, what's useful? B, I would say, ongoing monitoring of these is certainly best practice. So choosing relevant measures is certainly important. I'll also put a caveat in the draft report, and obviously I'll include more detail on this, but, everybody likes data and numbers, especially come budget season. But in the interest of avoiding paralysis by analysis, as they say, the intent wasn't to just bog you down with like 30, 40 different measures that you all would look at in any given year. I think it's adopting maybe what's already being done and pairing that with some new measures that would be interesting for you all to kind of monitor on a year-to-year basis as you look at peer cities. In that note, benchmarking, I think, is extremely important when it comes to these things. So not just looking internally, but also looking at what peer cities around us are doing. Again, as a best practice, we like to, as I joke in class sometimes, we shamelessly steal ideas from other cities. I mean, that's the whole point, is we learn what works, we learn what doesn't, we adapt those to what you can do here. So we look at other peer cities and aspirational cities and say, look, what are you doing? What works? What doesn't? We adopt those to our context, our resources, our constraints, et cetera. So I think benchmarking is one of the things to look at. So in considering what cities we also look at. Again, I mentioned this already, so again, I won't belabor these, and I'll kind of wrap up for questions, et cetera. So Internal Audit Department already does part of this. I would say, adopt some additional measures based on recommendations and your feedback on top of that. I will say as someone who is not an accountant, a lot of times the folks looking at some of these ratios and things like that, it just makes more sense if you're in the financial weeds every single day. For policymakers, for average citizens, sometimes those ratios and numbers are just like, okay, great, we're doing good. And so again, not to not to take away from any of that work. I think that work still needs to happen, obviously in terms of long-term financial health and sustainability of the city and the finances. But I would say in terms of what council looks for and potentially what citizens look for, things like that, is considering some of those additional measures and what we can add. The other one is back to my other point about actually using these and incorporating these in terms of what we can learn from other cities. And so ironically, I just reviewed a book for a public finance journal. Professor Ammons, who's at UNC, is a sort of guru of performance metrics, and he just read a book. And he really emphasized sort of this idea of best practice benchmarking, that it's not just about metrics, that we actually take those numbers and figure out how people achieve those in terms of looking at our peer cities and sort of what we can do to improve services. Okay, and then we'll lose the last slide, I'm not done. So currently, again, internal audit looks at 10 different cities. I would say, at least with this report, and I'm open to feedback, obviously, is I would keep a couple of these. So Knoxville, Huntsville, and Charleston, I think are good sort of peer cities to look at. I suggested some other ones, so Richmond, St. Petersburg, Florida, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and obviously there are others out there. But those are cities that I've looked at that are a little bit larger than us, that have, similar demographics, but let's say lower poverty rates, they have higher incomes, they have other sort of, demographic and economic targets that we're like, hey, we would like to see those here. So those are just 3 suggestions that I've made. I'm obviously open to exploring others. I'm sorry, no, this is not, yeah, sorry, yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, I left that out of the draft, I apologize. The measures that I would suggest focusing on, again, in addition to the ones internal audit's already doing, easy, simple ones, so per capita revenues and expenditures, so those are the ones Nashville and others do, with, again, caveats that, like, not everybody who lives in the city is paying into the system. Not everybody who lives here is a number of person receiving benefits from the city. So per capita is still just a little bit of a subjective number. But those are kind of easy ones to look at. Pension obligations obviously is one that would probably be of interest to you all. The revenue elasticity in terms of sales taxes, again, Weston mentioned this, and you all are looking at volatility in terms of potential revenue sources. So again, looking at your reliance on volatility of certain revenue sources, I think is good. And then again, larger demographic and economic factors. And then I think longer term, again, potentially beyond this report, in terms of council and others who may work on some of these things, I think the Councilwoman Burrs maybe even mentioned this the last time, is adopting more of a strategic planning process. What council wants to see as a city longer term, so that way, year to budget year, it's not just about what's happening in that fiscal year, it's how does this meet our goals long term. Looking at longer term outcomes, so again, not just year to year measures, looking at long term outcomes the city is experiencing or impacting. And then again, adopting more general performance measures. So again, not to get bogged down just in the metrics, but again, also looking strategically at kind of what other cities are doing and how they're achieving certain outcomes. So those are some of the longer term things I was looking at, and I will stop.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Acuff. With that, we do have a few questions, starting with Madam Chair Hill.
Thank you very much. Very quick question. We have a lot to consider as part of this report. The grocery tax data, can you please get us the numbers so that we understand broken out what we estimate grocery tax currently sends to our general fund each year?
Yeah, so I would say, I worked on a report for the county actually trying to estimate basically what people spend on groceries. So that's actually not publicly available data. So you all receive what's called a situs report, basically. So there's only a handful of people who actually can look up, what taxes, I guess, are paid by individual businesses, if that makes sense. And so I think, at least in my mind, and again, I could phone a friend back here, but I think that would be the only way that you'd be able to get at exactly what's being paid in grocery taxes. Is I think you could come up with, I think the city itself and finance could come up potentially with an estimate, but there are certain restrictions legally on people being able to access information about specifically what grocery stores are collecting in terms of certain revenues, if that makes sense.
So perhaps not that fine a point on it, but to get a projection of what percentage of our tax revenue comes from groceries, I mean, I would think that somewhere in the economic conversation, there are some sort of numbers on Tennesseans spend X amount on groceries, and it is X percentage of our total state income, or total state sales tax.
Yeah, so.
And then we could extrapolate from that, that if it's 30% or 60% of state sales tax, we could assume that it is 60% of our local sales tax comes from that, right?
Sure, yeah, so basically, a thing I'd worked on for the county a while back, basically I looked at household data in terms of household spending, how much it's estimated you spend on groceries. I looked at the revenues, and then I estimate a certain amount of percentage that people spend on food outside of the city or county, basically, based on previous research. So, yeah, so there's certainly a way to
I mean,
big picture estimate
We
that.
need to have an educated guess on
Yeah,
that,
okay.
on what that is.
Sure.
One other question that let's see. I find a lot of value in the conversation around incrementalism, both incremental revenue and incremental expense changes. I think that is smart for everybody. And I think the more we can, as a council, tackle that, the better off our citizenry will be. And also, with regard to building, determining our measures for fiscal health, I think it would be pretty terrific if what we ultimately choose is something that can be very public facing. To your point, a lot of people like ratios and things. There are ratios that are really critical for us all to understand, and I think we could explain some of those online. But for people at a glance, as part of our budget website, to see here's the stuff your city council's tracking, and here's where we stand against what we want to do, I think could be really helpful for the public to understand how healthy we are. And then the final thing I want to understand, Chris, is the cities that we're considering peer cities, do they have the same funding structure we do at the state and local level? I would like us to, if possible, match that as best we can, because I know that one of the big conversations that's entering the atmosphere right now, I'm hearing, is about senior citizens shouldn't pay property tax. Well, it's one thing to say that in Georgia that has income tax, and a completely different thing to say it in Tennessee where we don't have that revenue source, right? Property tax is not the lion's share of the Chamblee, Georgia budget, or fill in the blank. So when and like Huntsville, Alabama is one that anybody drives through and you're like, dang, these roads are sweet. But they don't pay as they go in Alabama for how they build roads, right? Georgia has a SPLOST. We could potentially get to that at some point. But the better we can really be peer to peer to peer, I think just the fewer questions we would have every single time. That's all. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. All right, Councilman Henderson.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, can you make sure that we have all the slides that were presented here today? Because there was several on there that I was just tearing through this report trying to find earlier, and I'm like.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, yeah, so.
Those are, so going back to our policy discussion, Madam Chair, that we're wanting to adopt, one of the questions that I forgot to bring up, and going back to the incrementalism, I feel like we need a policy that we fund increases on salary based on CPI or some number first in the budget. And we don't wind up putting employee pay, on the backs of employees whenever we talk about having to increase taxes. So I think that ought to be somewhere in our policy considerations, that employee pay is put there first. And whether it's a step, whether it's based on CPI, some increment. And then, Chris, I think the chart that you showed, and I think somewhere in here you had it, that you even spelled it out. I think we're over any given 4-year period, about 13.42% increase in those reappraisal years, correct?
Right.
Okay, so it looks like, you know, in some years, I know some years it was flat, and then we turned around and had a 24% increase, which is, I think, what put a target on our backs in the Senate or in the state legislature this year. You know, I think a probably more modest approach is either a 13% every 4 years or an incremental approach where, you know, we're looking at 3.5% per year or some number that we're looking at, although that would be a year-over-year approach, which some elected officials may not have the stomach to do that, and I can certainly understand. The other thing, and I think, and you identified in one of the slides that we didn't have, peer cities, and I think that's one of the goals that we wanted to have come out of this report is sort of adopt or identify and adopt peer cities so that across the board, we're sort of comparing ourselves against cities that are structured very similar to ours so that we have that baseline, Madam Chair, and that's something that, you know, I don't know if we want Chris to continue to research, to do work on, but at least in strategic planning and moving forward, I would like to develop a policy or whatever you want to call it on identifying and have a set of peer cities that we can look at. The other thing, Chris, and you had said that you wanted to leave the contributions to the pension funds, particularly to the fire and police, to the experts. But I guess, Madam Chair, I would like to see what we think the projections, and I know we're talking about what funding, we looked at funding percentages, but I would like to know what the contribution out of our general fund each year looks like going forward. Because I noticed that, you know, in 2015, we had more paying in that was receiving benefits, but in 2025, there's more receiving benefits that are paying in. And I would also be curious to know if that number was going to continue to increase to look like a K-shaped diagram, or if at some point we think it might level out. Madam Chair, the other thing that I would like some information about is I noticed on our general pension fund basically 2015, we've increased 223 employees. And I think I would like to know where those 223 individuals, those employees are, and the need for that increase. I mean, we pretty much held steady up to about 2022 with around 1,400 employees. And then starting in 2022, it seems like we started ramping up, and now we're 223 more employees than we were in 2015.
So actually, if it helps, I had backup slides. Sorry, this is me being a nerd. So this is actually the number of employees over time, and then the employees per capita per 100 residents. So yeah, there was a dip going from fiscal 17 over to 21, basically. And I looked at departmental, and again, this will be probably a question for HR or somebody else, but that either I could help you get or you could ask them. But looking at departments, there didn't seem to be like a huge drop or like reorganization necessarily. It seemed like just a couple per department. So again, it could be lots of retirements, things like that. I don't know. But yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a drop between 17 and 21, basically. But going back, it you know, if you kind of draw a line across those fiscal years.
Well, it looks like 2010, we had quite a few, I mean, probably about the same amount, and then we started dropping off. So you're saying around 2015 or so, 2017 was just sort of a low point, and then we.
Yeah, and
I didn't remember seeing this graph.
Yeah, it certainly increased, and you know, I will.
I just had the numbers that you had on your chart here. going
Yeah, I
back-
will say,
Going back
again,
to 2015.
Yeah, again, I don't want to misrepresent any conversations I had, but I believe there was a change in how some of the employees are counted in terms of part-time and full-time and contract employees, I believe. So again, I can, either I can go back and ask that, or, that could be a question for HR. But similar to what the chief was saying with consistent measurements, I think that's probably a change in terms of how the FTEs were calculated potentially even too. Is that was probably something between a change in FTEs or potentially others that they used to be contract employees or other or otherwise funded. But certainly I could follow up on that.
Okay. That's all I've got at this time.
All right, thank you so much, Councilman Henderson. I think I got everything down. And then Councilman Harvey.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Dr. Acuff, thank you for doing this. This is very in-depth and very enlightening. A couple questions for you. On the slide, when you said our natural growth in the city averages 1.6% from the previous year, when you say natural growth, is that new construction property tax only, or does that include sales tax?
Yeah, that's growth in development, residential and commercial property, basically.
Okay, so is that 1.6%, not the entire budget, but of the previous year's property tax?
Basically of the assessed value of the city, essentially.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So, I'm not a math major, but if I was, so if I calculated this correctly, in new construction, did we take in $29 million of new revenue in new construction?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to get a calculator too, but yeah, but I mean, so in the statistical tables and in the audits every year is they'll publish basically what the assessed value of the city is. And so that's basically where I pulled that from. Yeah, so it's adding new construction, commercial and otherwise.
Okay. Well, I guess my question is that 1.6% of the previous year's total revenue property tax?
That's of the assessed value. So I mean, in essence, it does translate, yes, to that. I mean, basically,
Okay.
yeah, sure, it translates to that equivalent.
Okay, all right, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, my second question is, you mentioned, some other funding sources, for example, like, we've got drivers coming here from other states, other cities, that kind of thing. And this may be more of a question for Phil, your office, and the attorney's office, but
Yes.
Do we have the authority to levy a visitor fee, visitor tax of some sort? And I'm not asking you to answer this right now. May be something we need to research, but have you seen that in other cities?
I mean, I would say off the top of my head, no, and I can't imagine.
Interstate commerce
Yeah,
clause.
that's probably not a thing. Yeah. Well, and just the implementation of that.
Okay.
I mean, again, but they're creative way. I mean, again, I mean, I'm not saying, but you drive through Atlanta, there's toll road, right? There are ways of capturing revenue from people coming through or into your city. But as far as just a fee of entering your city.
Well, I guess I should restate that. I'm not looking to charge anybody just coming to your city. You're more than welcome to come into the city of Chattanooga free of charge.
Hey, there's something I was kidding.
Do not mishear me here. We want you to come and go freely. Anyway, I guess my question was, I know we've got the motel hotel tax, but is there an ability for us to, people staying in our hotels are normally visitors. Is that something that we can, I guess for lack of a better term, tack on to, instead of the motel hotel tax, this is another, fee of some sort?
Yeah, so generally so basically you're almost tapped out on the hotel motel.
Right.
Again, there are certain things, again, surcharges that were authorized like under the Improve Act, but it has to be designated for certain purposes, like again, for transit, for certain infrastructure.
Well, that's what I was getting at is, for example, if we wanted to do a first responders fee, is that something that we could do? That would go directly to fire and police?
I would hedge on that and say, let me get back to you. I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but I guess it where would you then collect that, I guess? You know what I mean? As opposed to just tacking on to general property tax or, you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah. Okay.
There are certainly certain places that do user fees, you know what I mean? So in places, let's say they don't have recycling pickup, you can pay a fee and they'll come pick your garbage. There are certain places, like counties don't provide or aren't required to provide fire service in Tennessee. There are certain places that have subscription-based fire service. But generally, and Chattanooga included, is generally you're required to provide fire service to all residents of the city. And so you can't have like a subscription-based fee necessarily.
Right, no, it's certainly not. I'm just trying to brainstorm on, extra avenues of funding. And so if we could capture, folks coming here, whether it's through tourism or, like hotel motel, something like that. Additionally, I certainly, I'm not looking at some sort of subscription service, but just looking at a potential for an additional revenue source to help out fire and police.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I'm not advocating for necessarily raising sales tax, but something like that, it's not paid by all residents, it's paid by a lot of tourists or hotel motel, like you're saying.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Exactly.
The hard part about like hotel motel is generally you're constrained and you have to spend it on things like economic development, and there are certain parameters around what you can spend it on. So that's usually where you're kind of handcuffed a little bit.
Okay. All right.
But certainly I could look into that. Again, I'm not sure whether or not that's authorized in Tennessee.
Sure.
But I could certainly look into it.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Harvey. Phil, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, just briefly, I've been involved quite a while here with the city in my opportunity to look at your growth that has gone on. And we are also restricted in our growth at this point in time about not being able to annex. So that's another issue as far as the area that we've got. We cannot get any larger in size unless someone makes a petition to grow with us here and come into our city. We also have 9 other entities here in Hamilton County that also are municipalities that we have to deal with. I wondered in our peer cities how many others of those have that strange arrangement, because that, I believe, is one limitation that y'all have here in the city going forward, especially since your tax revenue is mainly from real property taxes. That's your basic source.
Sure.
So-
And again, this, I think, sort of plays into all the decisions you make here obviously are important. But, things like land use, we're trying to go up, we can't go out, you know what I mean? So certainly, decisions about development, and things like that are important, certainly when it comes to lots of issues, but potentially with our tax base.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the laws are. We only got one on the list in Knoxville that would have similar laws here in Tennessee. So just look at that when you're talking about your peer cities.
Okay, all right, thank you, Phil. All right, council, like the board is clear, and as a reminder, we will have a separate session regarding just this. But to Councilman Henderson's point, we'll work with Weston to work on some of the other incremental pay, as well as looking at those peer cities, because some of these things we can kind of go ahead and get done. Dr. Acuff, we appreciate you very much. We'll be in touch with some additional dates. And with that, Madam Chair.
Yeah, if I could, just to clarify, yeah, so next step, so I'll definitely get the peer cities, and then I'll look for your feedback.
Okay, did you get all the questions and everything?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, so.
Obviously, feel free to email me if you have anything else.
Yes, we have an attorney-client, and we will recess until 6:30. All right.
All right, council, we are back in session. Madam Clerk, will you please read item 7A?
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 3014 Dodge Avenue from IH Heavy Industrial Zone to CC Commercial Corridor Zone subject to certain conditions.
This is on final read. Vice Chairwoman Knoll.
Move to approve.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to ordinances under first reading, item 8A.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 4, which chapter is known as the Chattanooga Air Pollution Control Bureau Ordinance by providing for increased permit and certificate fees.
Second.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve this item with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Planning item B, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties located at 1815, 1819, 1823, and 1829 Jenkins Road from R16 Residential Neighborhood Zone to TRN2 Traditional Residential Neighborhood Zone subject to certain conditions.
Thank you. This is planning case 2025-0181. Is the applicant present? Thank you. Is there any opposition present? Okay, Councilman Harvey, this is in your district. I do not see any opposition present.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to make a motion to approve with conditions, and I will go ahead and read those conditions into the record now. A maximum density of 47 units. Dedicate right-of-way to the city of Chattanooga to achieve a minimum of 30 foot from the center line of Jenkins Road. Install a minimum 5-foot-high vinyl-coated chain-link fence along the southern boundary of the development from the right-of-way of Jenkins Road to the floodplain limits of Mackey Branch. A 20-foot planted buffer to be installed and maintained per city standards along and behind the new right-of-way of Jenkins Road south of the property located at 1825 Jenkins Road. And lastly, all homes shall be set back a minimum distance of 40 feet from the Jenkins Road right-of-way, except for any required front build-to-zone setbacks from Jenkins Road. That concludes my conditions.
And does the attorney have a copy of those?
No, but I'll send it to him.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the conditions as read. And we have a proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? Do you want the applicant to acknowledge the conditions?
Sure.
Can
He says good. We're good.
we, Madam Clerk, we witness a thumbs up from the applicant. I think Mike's thumbs up must be as good as his word. We're going to hope on behalf of Councilman Harvey and the people of District 4. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item C, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 8476 East Brainerd Road from RN16 Residential Neighborhood Zone to CTMU Traditional Mixed Use Commercial Zone subject to certain conditions.
Thank you. This is planning case 2026-0013. Is the applicant present? Oh, Mr. Thumbs Up is over there. The applicant is present. Do we have any opposition present? Okay, Councilman Harvey, this is in your district.
Thank you. I also make a motion to approve with one condition, and the developer and I have talked about this, and he is in favor, to provide the 20-foot type C commercial buffer on all property lines abutting any residential zone.
It
Okay.
also has another condition on ours.
Yes, that's fine. We'll keep that.
Keep that as well.
Yes.
Okay. So 2 conditions then.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Can I get a second, council? All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve with 2 conditions. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item D, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 4412 Dodge Avenue from RN15 residential neighborhood zone to CTMU traditional mixed-use commercial zone.
Thank you. This is planning case 2026-0001. The very first application put in for this year is the applicant here. Y'all, I feel like this is like the first baby born of the year. The applicant is not present. Is there any opposition present? All right, Councilman Elliott, this is in your district?
No, Dolly.
Oh, I apologize. This is in Councilwoman Dotley's district, which is why her light is on. Sorry, it's the next one that's in mine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For this one, I want to first move to approve, and I want to approve with conditions that there's no liquor store. Does that need to be an amendment, or that's fine?
Needs to be added as an amendment on here at this point to add one more condition that there is no use allowed as a liquor store.
Okay.
But do we need to add it as an amendment? Because we just added conditions, and we often add conditions
As long
as
as you
part of
have
the
that
initial
as a
motion.
condition to the motion on here. This is on first reading. So.
Right.
So you can put it in with your motion.
Okay, so I move to approve with the condition that there be no liquor store permitted on the property.
All right. Can I get a second, council?
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the condition there cannot be a liquor store on the property. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item E, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties located at 1810 South Kelly Street and unaddressed properties in the 1800 block of South Kelly Street and the 2100 block of East 19th Street from RN2 residential neighborhood zone to TRN3 traditional residential neighborhood zone development subject to certain conditions.
Thank you. This is planning case 2026-003-0003. Is the applicant present? Do we have any opposition present? All right, Councilman Elliott, this one is in your district.
Move to approve, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. All right. Item F.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance so as to rezone property located at 2212 Bailey Avenue from RN2 residential neighborhood zone to TRN3 traditional residential neighborhood zone.
Thank you. This is planning case 2026-0008. Is the applicant present? Is there any opposition present? Councilman Elliott, this is in your district.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to defer this until March 10th, and I'll make that in the form of a motion.
Thank you. All right, we have a motion on the floor, council, to defer until March 10th. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item G, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance as adopted by ordinance number 14137 on July 23, 2024, Article 14, Administrator, Section 3869, Board of Appeals.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Item H, please.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38 zoning ordinance as adopted by ordinance number 14137 on July 23, 2024, more specifically, Article 2, definitions related to the flood hazard regulations.
Second.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Let's take items A and B in resolutions as a package, please.
Item A, a resolution appointing Dwayne Bush Sr. to the Passenger Vehicle for Hire Board for Districts 4, 5, and 6 with a 3-year term beginning on February 11, 2026 and ending on February 10, 2029. Item B, a resolution reappointing Sandra Norwood to the Head Start Governing Board for District 5 with a 2-year term beginning on October 26, 2025 and ending on October 26, 2027.
Thank you, council. We have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Madam
Is-
Chair?
Yes,
If I may.
yes, you may. Oh, I had you and then push your light again. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Burrs had to leave for a meeting tonight and has asked me, since I'm one of the 3 districts that are appointing tonight to the Passenger Vehicle for Hire Board, we wanted to recognize Dwayne Bush Jr. for being here. I'm sorry, senior, I apologize. Dwayne Bush, thank you for being here. Thank you for serving our city. We appreciate your service. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Also, we'd like to thank Sandra Norwood. Is she here tonight? Well, Sandra, if you're watching online, we appreciate your service. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, item C.
A resolution,
Alternate version, please.
I only have one version on my document.
You had an alternate version 3, actually.
And you do not have you don't
I
have
do not.
access to alternate version 3? Council, might I suggest that we make a motion to defer this item until next week?
Sure.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion on the floor to defer until 2/17. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion to defer passes. And we will get a tidy version on the agenda for next week. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, economic development, item D, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Economic Development to enter into a third agreement to exercise option to renew with Songbirds Foundation, Inc. for the continued use of a certain space at the South Chattanooga Community Center located at 1151 West 40th Street, further identified as tax amount number 1550N001.03 for an additional term through March 14, 2027 for the annual rent of $1.
Second.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And Madam Clerk, I abstain from that vote. Motion passes. Item E.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Economic Development to enter into a first agreement to exercise option to renew with the American Heart Association, Inc., and substantially the form attached for the continued use of the surface parking lot located at 515 East 4th Street, further identified as tax map number 135MJ002, and located adjacent to the American Heart Association property at 519 East 4th Street for an additional term of 1 year for the consideration of $10.
Vice Chairwoman Knoll.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Council. We have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item F.
A resolution authorizing the administrator of Parks and Outdoors to accept a donation from Trust for Public Land, TPL, for the purpose of supporting trail development and activities that support public use and access to Providence Street Park. In exchange for accepting this grant, TPL requires that Providence Street Park include the following statement in all public materials promoting the activities under this grant. Providence Street Park was created with the assistance of the Trust for Public Land in the amount of $30,000 with no matching funds required.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item G.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Public Works to enter into an interlocal agreement with the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, UTC, to research the potential impacts of land use and land cover change on Friar Branch, with a particular emphasis on urbanization, settlement, transport, channel widening, and develop tools by which the city of Chattanooga may be able to calculate water quality parameters with respect to total maximum daily load, TMDL.
Thank you. Council, we have a motion on the floor to approve with the proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to purchases.
Good evening, council. Have 4 purchases recommended for approval this evening. The first is with Public Works. This is a one-time purchase for tree planting in the amount of $56,135. The awards will go to Big Sky Landscapes and Lumberjacks Tree Service as the best bids. Number 2 is for Fleet. This is a one-time purchase of a 2025 International garbage truck to be used by solid waste. This purchase from Environmental Products Group will be in the amount of $254,630, utilizing a Sourcewell contract. Number 3 is for Public Works. This is a new blanket agreement for overgrowth abatement services. This will be a 4-year agreement not to exceed $350,000 annually. The awards will go to TRG Lawn Care, Special Touch Lawn Service, Grassbuster Lawn Maintenance, and River City Remodeling as the best bids. Number 4 is for wastewater. Wastewater is requesting a 1-year extension to agreement PA 100106 with Xylem for bypass pumping equipment rental in the estimated annual spend of $1,800,000.
Thank you very much. Council, can I get a motion?
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve these purchases with a proper second. Do we have any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
I have one emergency to report. Belfour USA Group is providing mold remediation services at the Police Service Center in the amount of $1,217,481.78.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, committee reports. Let's see, I think I started down here last week. Councilman Henderson. No report. Councilman Davis.
No report, but did just want to acknowledge the group of Public Works employees and fire department firefighters who recently went to Hickman County outside of Nashville to provide disaster relief following the winter storms. And by all accounts, they did a fabulous job representing our city. So just wanted to give them a shout out tonight.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Harvey.
No report?
Councilman Elliott. Councilwoman Dotley.
Yes, thank you so much, Madam Chair. We did have a budget committee meeting today with PFM advisors giving us an update, a bond report update. We discussed 4 financial policies as well as got a summary from Dr. Acuff. And just be on the lookout. I'll be in touch with you, of course, to see about scheduling some additional education sessions.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Vice Chairwoman Knoll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we will have a legislative committee meeting next week. Councilman Harvey, you will be ready front and center?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. For landscape plan.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have one item that the attorney needs to report.
Yes, as we heard this afternoon from both your city finance officer and Lauren Lowe from PFM, this is a report on debt obligations on general obligation bonds that needs to be reported to y'all, needs to be part of your minutes and kept there, which is on file with the state. And it shows that there is a bonded indebtedness of $35,420,000 that was approved this year.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have reached the point in our meeting where we are happy to hear from people who are here and would like to address the council. If you are here and would like to address the council, please go ahead and line up behind the podium and listen while our attorney reads the rules.
Yes, ma'am. And at the end of each council business meeting, the chair will recognize members of the public who wish to address the council, and here's your rules. Each speaker wishing to address the council can only be recognized at the microphone up front provided for that purpose. Can't have more than 3 minutes to speak, and you can address the council only upon matters within their legislative and quasi-judicial authority and not on matters which are not under their authority or regulated by other governmental bodies or agencies. Do not engage in any vulgar or obscene language, nor use the floor to personally attack or personally denigrate others, and address the council as a whole and not make comments towards individual council members. Lastly, do not engage in disorderly conduct or disrupting a public meeting, which is prohibited by Tennessee law, and someone commits that offense if a person substantially obstructs or interferes with the meeting by physical action or verbal utterance with the intent to prevent or disrupt a lawful meeting or gathering. Having stated those rules, please go ahead, sir, and state your name and district, if you would.
Edward Hewitt, District 9. I just wanted to start by thanking Chief for coming out and giving us this wonderful presentation. I hope that everybody else got the same thing that I got out of it, in addition to a whole lot of other stuff. But I saw that in the last 3 years, the CPD has done an extremely good job. We have reduced arrests by 1,500 plus, in addition to reducing a whole bunch of other crime. Everything I saw on that chart was a reduction and showing how great of a job our Chattanooga Police Force is doing. So let's give them a round of applause, because they're doing a great job. And I really appreciate them. So that being said, as we enter into this talk about finances and budget for the next year, I just want to be clear, we're doing a great job. They don't need any more money. He's going to come asking for it because it's his job, and he should. And he's going to come saying, hey, I need to give people more raises and all this stuff. Clearly, the numbers that he presented show that they are doing a great job. There's no need to give them more money. We already gave them more money with the taxes. So that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Hi, I'm Lauren Hurley, District 7. I also want to thank the council for having Chief Chambers give this presentation. I also was pleasantly surprised by a lot of the data that he presented to us today. I also just want to say that I wish every officer in Chattanooga and beyond was like Chief Chambers, because I can really tell that his heart is in the right place. I was honestly expecting to be able to have a gotcha moment and be able to point something out where, like an instance where officers are moving to arrest people at risk of deportation when they could have instead used their discretion to avoid an arrest, you know, stuff like that. But it turns out I don't have a gotcha, and I can't point something like that out. The state of Tennessee has come down really hard on this issue and has covered all the bases, and the chief is just following the law to the letter. What I do want to say is that acknowledging that, unfortunately, CPD does make arrests that ultimately result in deportations, which occur way after the situation is no longer in their hands and they have nothing to do with that part. Hold on, I lost my place. Knowing that that is the case doesn't cause the Hispanic community at large to distrust the police or avoid calling the police when they're in trouble. It is an unfortunate reality that undocumented people have been avoiding having to interact with the police for years, long before recent events have occurred. I witnessed it myself roughly 5 years ago when I saw a woman sedan with herself and her small children inside get struck by a pickup truck in a hit-and-run situation. Her car was totaled, and thankfully she and her children were okay, but she did not want anything to do with the police, even though she was victimized in this situation. And, you know, I disagree with that morally. I think that's awful. I'm sure a lot of people here feel the same. So I guess I just want to implore the council and everybody else here today to imagine, what can we tell our undocumented friends and neighbors, most of which are, you know, hardworking members of society, giving to society without taking from society, nonviolent people, good people? How do we let them know that they are safe here? How can we let them know that they can call the police when they're in trouble if it risks deportation? It makes me think that sometimes just following the law isn't enough, and sometimes the law can be unjust, like we've seen several times in the past over. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nifs again, and District 4, I'm your problem, I found out. I do apologize on my glasses. I forgot my glasses. Last week, one of you mentioned that city council meetings had some things. Oh, wait. Oh, my God. I'm so sorry. When you spoke at the end of last week's city council meeting, you said some things, and I'd like to follow up, not directed at anybody particular, but as a council as a whole. You guys said that your hands are tied, that the state has passed laws saying if used as elected officials, push anything around immigration, you're subject to Class D felonies. After doing some research myself, I have a better understanding of the Class D felonies you mentioned, and I've learned quite a bit, finding out that Tennessee has created one of the most anti-sanctuary laws that there is, that even the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, is actively challenging this legislation as it infringes on constitutional rights. Tennessee Code 768-102. I understand you guys are not allowed to put in rules that place rules in place that stops ICE from getting information, but that does not say anything about the city or CPD going out of its way to help ICE. And no one's asking CPD to override federal immigration law by pretending someone is legal when they're not. It only states that you cannot block or limit cooperation. Meanwhile, the following are allowed: funding legal aid, publicly criticizing ICE, helping families, knowing your rights education, data transparency, public pressure from the state, and using your platform to call out Tennessee laws, condemning ICE practices, publicly acknowledging the harm that it does to the community, and showing at rallies, meeting with affected families, and speaking alongside residents. I want to clarify, I am not running or a spokesperson, but somebody who just attends these protests. The community peacefully gathers every Monday from 16 to 17:30, which is 4:35 p.m. in civilian terms, at Miller Park, and I would respectfully invite the city council members to attend and show up, and even be just briefly speaking to the community and listen and learn of some of the things as I've had, which is why I've gotten more and more involved into the community, learning a lot of different things, and hence why I will keep coming back. It's called Invisible in Chattanooga Bridge. They're on social media, and that's where I get a lot of my information from, if you guys are interested in it as well. We're not out here saying everything is bad, but enough people are being affected that it is impacting everyone that matters. And my closing statement is there's not enough holy water, crystals, or deep breathing for the level of global nonsense we're fucking witnessing. And that is it. Thank you.
Okay, hey, Niff, I need you not to curse next time, okay?
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to have to cut you off, friend.
Good evening, Council. Mark Shackelford, Shackelford Towing and Recovery. Coming here to this body again for some help with the annual cost of living rate increase that the towing operators are, at some point supposed to be awarded through the Transportation for Hire Board, which seems to not have any answers and needs the help of the mayor's office to get this transaction through again. Didn't know if you guys could offer any help or if the mayor's office might be willing to help.
Councilman Elliott, did you want to speak to that?
If you wouldn't mind.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Chris, can you help us with this? After the meeting, yes, sir. All right, thank you.
We'd like to have the mayor's office at our meetings where we can get things accomplished instead of having to come here each time. That's kind of a thing that we've asked for, and it happened for a short time and then it stopped suddenly.
Okay.
Last 5 or 6.
Councilwoman Dotley, did you want to say anything more?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Yes, I was just going to note that, yes, Chris has put a placeholder on, I think, 3-week out agenda.
Okay.
So that should be coming up soon.
Also, I'd like to speak with Chief if I could offline about
that's
things
fine. That's
with
it,
the
Madam Chair.
regulatory unit, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council? All right. Oh.
Hi, my name is Julia Henderson, and I am in District 8. I do also want to start off by thanking all of you and Chief Chambers for giving us this presentation at the beginning of this meeting. I believe it was very insightful. My dad is a police officer in Nashville, has been a police officer in Nashville for over 25 years now. So I was raised to respect the police, and I do appreciate the utility of police within the community setting. And I appreciate the education on what the police are doing in our community, because I believe that education is one of the most powerful tools that we have. At the same time, I was raised to always do the right thing. And when I was younger, that strictly used to mean following the law. Although as I've gotten older and as I have become more educated, I have realized that legality does not always equal morality. And I wanted to just say that I understand that it appears that there is nothing that we can do on a lower level when the state law says that we must act in a certain fashion. But realistically, that's why I'm here. That is why I'm speaking, is because I want everyone here to know that there are things that we can do, whether we know the answers to that or not. I want everyone in this room to know. And I want everyone in this room to know that there are other people who are looking for the same answers that they are. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address the council? Council, I don't see that we have anyone else that would like to address the council.
Move to adjourn, second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to adjourn with a proper second. And going once, going twice, all in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you. 7 o'clock on the dot.